In the laboratory, a possessed scientist was conducting an experiment. A violet liquid bubbled ominously in a tank above the ceiling. Shaking the quartz cylinder, he exclaimed frantically that it had worked. Now the system would be able to inhabit someone. The scientist could not take his eyes off the particle of violet matter enclosed in the cylinder. Right before his eyes, the quartz began to glow. The scientist realized too late that something terrible was happening. He screamed out loud. At the same moment, there was an explosion at a secret U.S. base. It was deep night in Yanjiao City. Everyone was already asleep. Only one window was lit. A young man named Chung couldn't sleep. He watched news reports about giant monsters that appeared out of nowhere in every city around the globe. The young man was comfortably seated on the sofa and was greedily chomping on the kebab. A can with a drink was in his hands. A notification came to his phone. Turns out this was something Chung had been waiting for a long time. The next chapter of his favorite manga was out. This was more important than all the news. He was only 22 years old. Chung lived alone. No monsters from other universes could interest him. He had barely finished university and got a hopeless job, but he lived in a dirty apartment. He was only interested in new chapters of the book. It was at this moment that a purple substance entered the room through the gap between the windows, forming solid matter as it went. Chung was sitting at his computer at this time and didn't suspect anything. He laughed at the manga protagonist's stupid actions. At the same second, a blob of dark energy violently flew into the back of the young man's head. Chung let go of the phone in surprise. The glass in the apartment shattered on the floor. The young man's collision with a small piece of quartz caused an explosion. The energy release was so strong that the destruction affected all the houses within a kilometer radius of the apartment. Meanwhile, Chung came to his senses and felt the back of his head. He wailed that something strange was happening. He hid his fear by shouting. At the same second, the young man was propelled to the ceiling by an unknown force. The system reported that the host had been successfully implanted. The young man's whole body began to bubble. He was in a lot of pain. The system initialized the process of strengthening his body. All of his veins were tense and his veins were swollen with tension. He felt as if he would be torn to pieces. The pain gradually began to fade away, and Chung exhaled with great pleasure. He no longer believed that he could survive after such a thing. Suddenly he realized that he had an irresistible urge to sleep. His eyes began to close on their own. It was strange. Chung resisted sleep with all his might, but his eyelids were getting heavier by the second. His eyes were closing more and more. The young man slept very well and peacefully, so the next day he did not wake up until lunchtime, when the sun was already high in the sky. When Chung opened his eyes, he found that his head was just splitting with a terrible pain. There were pieces of glass scattered around him. Chung picked up the phone and looked at the phone screen with half-asleep eyes. To his dismay, it was already 10 o'clock in the morning. Getting ready for work, the young man was surprised to realize that he could easily jump all the way to the ceiling. His body became as light as a balloon. Hitting the ceiling once again, Chung remembered that he had had a rather strange dream about some system yesterday. The alien interception system notified that it was connected to his body. The young man put it down to the fact that he was still dreaming. Smiling, he jumped out of the broken window in one fell swoop, determined to try out his new superpowers. Suddenly, Chung began to realize that he was no longer dreaming. He felt that he was floating in the air. The young man looked down. Wang's roommate was trying on clothes, standing by the window. But it wasn't Wang who lived downstairs in his dream. It was a nice girl. Chung was rapidly falling downwards. He couldn't believe that he would die just like that, flying out of the window and crashing to the pavement. The young man's body swept past the window of Wang's neighbor at a great speed. She was looking thoughtfully out the window and didn't notice anything. Meanwhile, Chung, to his surprise, landed smoothly on the ground. He asked the system how to save the world. The system suggested choosing a skill and character class. The young man hesitated. He felt that it wasn't really fair to others. There were 4 classes in all. The scholar seemed like the optimal choice. On the other hand, the cultivator also had its advantages. The process of choosing between a scholar, cultivator, mutant, and vampire took a long time. Chung couldn't decide which was better. It was only when the system threatened to pick everything itself that the young man squealed that he was choosing a cultivator and primary combat skills. The process of appropriating a skill had begun. Chung began to have doubts. He felt like he should have chosen something else. The system reported that he had received the basic combat skill. The young man felt stronger and more confident. He liked that. Clutching the violet quartz in his hand, Chung exclaimed that now he was beginning to mean something to this world. A young man was sitting on the ground and mumbling something. An elderly couple passed by. They felt sorry for the boy who had lost his mind at such a young age. The system informed him that all tasks had to be completed on time, otherwise punishment would follow. This shocked the young man. He didn't realize that there were punishments too. To his greatest surprise, Chung learned that for failing his current assignment, he was facing a loss of sexual function for 3 years. The young man involuntarily felt himself and made sure that everything was in order. He realized that the system knows how to motivate, and everything should be done on time. Meanwhile, in the center of the city, Yan Zhao went live. Violent murders of young girls have increased in the city. The reporter said there were witnesses near the scene who were willing to describe what the suspect looked like. She offered to interview eyewitnesses. The woman could only say that the killer was very scary and rather strangely dressed. Suddenly, right on the white and blue fabric awning they were under, another victim fell from a great height. All the gawkers stuck their heads up and started screaming. One bald man shouted that he could see the killer in that window. The alien Dong Mengqing stood in snow-white clothes with a golden border on the ledge. Another girl he held by the waist with one hand. He shouted that their world was very dirty. There were no decent girls here. The alien laughed and said that the girl deserved to die. The journalist exclaimed that this was the maniac and asked the cameraman to film him properly. You can't miss him. The onlookers started to make noise. They were scared. Meng Qing promised to deal with the girl first, and then take care of the others. At the same time, Chung was flying through the city. The system reported that the alien was within half a kilometer of him. After learning what was required to intercept, the young man began to descend closer to the scene with quick jumps. After learning new skills, his body didn't feel tired. Even jumping from heights did not bring discomfort. Landing on yet another rooftop, Chung saw a crowd of people surrounding the girl. The young man didn't understand what they were all doing. A target appeared before his eyes, courtesy of the system. The target for interception was set. On the roof of a neighboring house, Chung discovered an alien who was trying to grab a girl. She fought off the alien with all her might. Licking greedily, Dong Mengqing promised to be gentle. The system reported brief details about the alien monster. Chung was very surprised. He knew from his history course that this person was already bad, but as an invader, he was even worse. The system reported that it was just a coincidence. Meanwhile, Chung discovered the reporters downstairs. He didn't want to be caught on camera. The solution came quickly. There were clotheslines on the roof, and one of them revealed a black mask. The young man pulled it off. Jumping to a lower roof, Chung told himself that a true hero would never let himself be recognized. The young man saw the invader molesting the embarrassed girl and tearing her dress apart. He ordered the stranger to step aside. Mengqing didn't react. Chung raised his voice and repeated his demands. He said that he was addressing a stranger. The young man folded his arms across his chest and, from under a mask that had a dog nose and whiskers painted on it, declared that the stranger had asked for it by calling him a dog. Chung went down to the roof and demanded that the girl be released immediately, or else he would deal with the alien in a hurry. Mengqing unhappily pushed the girl away and said that he would deal with that clown first before returning to her. Pulling out a long, shiny blade from behind his back, the invader smiled and suggested that the young man deal with his sword first. Chung was a little scared and asked him to wait. He was so engrossed in his menacing shouts that he didn't even notice the sword behind the stranger's back. Mengqing made a lightning-fast lunge with his sword towards the young man. He gloatingly declared that no one was going to wait for the kid. Barely dodging the deadly blade, Chung pleaded and asked the system to think of something before he was killed. The system started a countdown and announced that it was beginning to create the weapon. Chung was sure he would die before he got the weapon. The young man had to flee. With his fighting skills, he could anticipate every move of the alien invader. Mengqing knew that his opponent could not escape. Swinging his sword, he declared that Chung was just another victim of his sword. There was absolutely nowhere to retreat further. Chung was walled up against the barrier on the roof. He barely dodged another sword strike. Suddenly there was a strange sound. The small piece of violet quartz in the young man's hand finally revealed its abilities. From the heavy blow, Mengqing flew to the opposite edge of the roof. He covered himself with his sword and tried to understand what had happened. Chung was now armed with a long spear with a twisted tip. He asked victoriously who Mengqing now considered to be the victim. The invader had to admit that his opponent was not as simple as he had looked at the beginning of the battle. He pulled his spear out of the air. Taking advantage of his confusion, Chung rushed with his spear straight at the enemy and pushed off from the roof. Once high above his opponent, Chung began to quickly poke at him with his spear, saying that the stranger was finished. The duel on the roof quickly drew the attention of onlookers and camera crews. A bald man filmed the action on his phone. Meanwhile, Chung realized that it was more complicated than that. He couldn't even defeat a low-rank alien. The system advised him to behave unpredictably. Mengqing laughed and dodged the spear. This was too easy for him. At the same second, Mengqing made a lightning-fast lunge with his sword. The young man sagged backwards and the blade whistled past him. Chung was very satisfied. He had managed to deceive his opponent. The young man immediately tried to reach the stranger with his spear. Without stopping there, Chung began to spin in a circle, applying his spear strike and the basics of combat at the same time. Ching hesitated, and the young man managed to hit his opponent with the spear shaft under his arm. The stranger cried out in surprise. He lost his balance and fell down. Taking advantage of this, Chung pushed him away with such force that Ching hit the roof railing. The invader coughed up blood. He backtracked and said that they had nothing to share. Ching suggested a peaceful separation. The young man said he couldn't let him go, and threw his spear at the stranger with all his might, learning a new spinning spear technique. Ching couldn't believe his eyes. He had thought that this technique had long been lost. It was not easy to resist such a technique. Ching encased himself in a transparent golden sphere. This technique, used in the presence of a sword, was called the Golden Bowl. Chung looked at him with displeasure. He had no idea what kind of technique it was, but he didn't like the protective sphere very much. Unfurling his spear, the young man brought it down on the protective dome with force. Ching pointed his sword from the sphere at him at the same time. The spear spun so fast that the sword created with the best technology simply cracked and shattered into pieces. Moreover, the speed of the throw was enough for the spear to pierce through the alien, and he flew backwards with curses. The protective transparent sphere disappeared at once. The stranger collapsed to the ground, making a solid dent in the roof of the building. Chung heaved a sigh of relief and smoothly landed on the roof. He finally managed to close the matter with the low-rank monster. Chung held out his palm, and the spear in the stranger's body began to melt and flow into the young man's hand. The spear should have been hidden for now. Ching lay like that in a small depression, bleeding. His eyes were closed. The young man said to himself that the stranger deserved it. The invader's body disappeared at the same moment. In the center of the large pit, traces of his blood and 2 large wads of money remained. There was something else nearby. The 2 bank packs looked very solid. Chung was happy to have such an impressive amount of money. There was a green pendant lying beside the money. As soon as he took another step, the money immediately evaporated. The system notified him that the 200,000 he had found had been transferred to the Interceptor's account. After twirling the jasper pendant in his hands, Chung decided that Fatty Chung should obviously know if he could get something for it. The girl finally came out of hiding. She realized that her life was no longer in danger. The girl exclaimed that Chung was a real hero. The guy seemed so cute at that moment that she almost fell in love and threw herself into his arms. Chung blushed with embarrassment. He said that he didn't do anything special. For the first time in her life, the girl ran to him to hug him. At that moment, the system reported that the police were approaching. He'd better hide. Chung started to argue, but realized it was better to disappear. He shouted to the girl that he had to run away and left. Chung was very reluctant to leave the roof. He thought he had found the love of his life. All this time, the girl looked at him with admiring eyes. She believed that they would meet again, and the young man would give her many red roses. Pushing off from the roof, Chung jumped higher. The girl was disappointed that she had gone out today without lenses and couldn't see her savior's face. Dreamily looking off into the distance, the girl smiled. She knew for sure that the guy was very handsome. At that moment, police officers ran out onto the roof. Carefully covering the girl's shoulders with a shawl, the officer suggested Miss Yan to go downstairs. Mr. Mayor was already waiting for her there. 2 ambulance crews were on duty at the entrance. The mayor rushed forward with a shout of joy as soon as he saw his daughter. He put his arm around the girl's shoulders. She said that the mayor should reward her savior. The man said he would definitely reward the young man. A girl in a white uniform intervened in their conversation. Showing her ID card, Zhao Ling introduced herself. She represents the Central Intelligence Bureau. Legally, that guy with the spear is now a murderer too. Civilians shouldn't be vigilantes, and she'll handle the case. Zhao Ling turned around and left. The mayor and the disgruntled girl stared at her for a long time. They didn't like the situation. As a reward for his work, Chung received some knowledge from the Qinggong technique and a third of the defeated invader's inner strength. After analyzing the young man's vitals and combat stats, the system stated that he is now a third-rate fighter. Chung sat at the wide window of the skyscraper and looked out over the city. He was proud that he could win such a difficult fight without even getting a scratch. He called Fatty Chan and suggested that he meet him outside the Emperor Hotel. The young man said he was in great need of his help. Already in the car, Chan told his friend about the spearmaster who was now his idol. The young man was perplexed and asked who he was. Chan laughed. His friend was very much out of touch with life. The clip of the spearmasters playing on every corner. He suggested Chung watch that video. That guy is a real master. Chung noted that the video had gotten a lot of views. It was interesting for him to see himself from the outside. Obviously filmed by some gawker from downstairs. Good thing he was wearing a mask. Chung smiled. He liked feeling like a new superhero, even though his status as Spearmaster sounded a bit too simple. A few minutes later, Chung pulled up to an antique street. There were art objects on every corner of the street. The store manager was surprised that Chung Yang-wei didn't come alone today. His father is a big developer and is very rich. The girl waved an antique fan and announced that there had recently been a new arrival. She offered to familiarize herself with the assortment. Song Chung stepped forward a bit with a green jasper pendant in the shape of an amphibian and asked if ancient jewels were accepted here. The girl took the pendant and began to scrutinize it through a small monocular. She found the thing interesting. After a few minutes, the girl said that this pendant was very rare and valuable. It belongs to the Tang dynasty. The girl said that it was better to sell such exhibits at auction. She thought for a moment, not knowing how much money to quote. An old man with glasses suddenly appeared behind the backs of the visitors. He agreed to buy this piece immediately for 15 million. The saleswoman grudgingly tells the old man why he is disturbing the small shop when he is a major antiques collector. The old man says that such a thing was sold for 15 million last week, and that he doesn't want customers to be cheated. The girl says she is offering 16 million yuan for the amulet. She looks at the protagonist from under the fan and asks if he agrees to that price. He thinks he didn't even think the thing was worth the money and agrees to the offered price. The hero and his friend say goodbye and leave the antique shop. The saleswoman tells the old man if he is in a hurry to quote such a high price. He replies that such a jewel is actually much more expensive, and its real value is 10 times higher. The girl grabs the old man's face and enthusiastically asks if the price of the thing is really 160 million yuan. The protagonist receives a notification on his phone that 16 million has been deposited into his bank account. The hero says cheerfully that he did not believe to the last that the old man had such sums. Chan says that he knew they would not be cheated. Chan asks if the hero has thought about his offer, now that he has the money. The hero nods and says he'll do anything. After that, the hero comes to a huge office building. The hero walks forward and thinks about the fact that he used to come here reluctantly. But nothing can upset him now. The girl at the counter calls him a loser and says the manager will skin him for skipping a few days. A guy walks into the office with his hands in his pockets and hears a man yelling at him. The man yells and says he couldn't reach him. The hero replies that his phone broke, and he has only now bought a new one. The man says the hero is also an excuse. He turns to the other employees and says that only losers do that. The rest of the workers look at the hero and laugh at him. The manager shouts that he can easily find a replacement for such a lazy and stupid employee. The hero thinks about the fact that the manager wouldn't have been able to get the position if it weren't for family ties. The man continues to yell that the hero is being fined, and that he will be fired next time. The hero thinks about the fact that the rest of the staff is ready to laugh at the others, but as soon as something needs to be done, they immediately go quiet. The character introduces the employees as ducks. He doesn't hold back and starts laughing. The manager gets even angrier that the hero started laughing. The hero's phone rings and he says he'll take the call. He grabs the manager's face, covering his mouth. The hero picks up his smartphone and greets Fatty Chan. Chan tells him on the phone that he's already bought a villa and a jeep like the guy asked for. He tells the hero to come downstairs. The employees are surprised and can't believe that the hero now has a villa and a jeep. A car horn honks. The girl looks out the window and says that there is indeed a fat man standing by the jeep. The employees look down and discuss that the car is worth at least 5 million and turn their attention to his new cell phone. The employees don't understand what happened to the hero and where he got the money from. The hero tells the manager that he wanted to tell him something. The manager replies that he was just worried about the hero since he wasn't picking up the phone. The hero says he won't have to worry now as he quits the company and starts to leave. A coworker stares at him mesmerized and thinks she never noticed he was cute before. After that, the events take place in the Central Intelligence Bureau. There, the girl says that they have suspicions that the Spearmaster may also be an alien. She says the Spearmaster has not been seen committing any other crimes. One of the staff members says judgmentally that the girl is trying to dispatch him, and that the Spearmaster should be captured regardless of who he is. The girl salutes and agrees. As everyone leaves the conference room, she looks at the screen with the footage of the previous alien attack. She wonders how the hero was able to overpower such a strong alien. She wondered who he was and where to start looking for him. After that, the events unfold in the evening on a crowded city street. Chan and the main character are sitting at a table happily eating kebabs. Chan says he doesn't know what happened to the kid, but he's happy for his progress. The hero says he's excited himself, and that he'll finally be able to give Chan a treat after all these years. Chan suggests that the hero propose to his old love since he has gotten rich. The hero is embarrassed and not sure if he should do it. He thinks back to the girl and wonders if she's still waiting for him. His memories are interrupted by a system notification that says a new alien with a beastman type has been sighted. The hero jumps up and loudly inquires about whether the beastman is really in Shanghai now. His friend worriedly asks if he's had too much to drink. The events then take place in Shanghai in an expensive hotel with a huge aquarium. There, One attendee says they are honored to have the summit chairman attend. The girl asks what the chairman's plans are for the day, and he replies that unfortunately he has an appointment to discuss investment plans. The girl replies that if he wants to talk about anything other than investments, she will be in her room. Meanwhile, some movement is seen in the aquarium. A huge silhouette of a sea monster appears in the aquarium behind the unsuspecting guests. The action takes place at night. A man enters a puddle. There is a splash of water. The janitor complains that the water was last changed a long time ago. There is a huge body of water around him. He wonders where all the fish in the reservoir have gone. He throws food into the water and is surprised when no one swims in to eat. With a splash, the food begins to sink slowly into the water. The janitor has no time to react as suddenly a tentacle is wrapped around his neck. He screams as he is pulled into the depths by an unknown creature. It is drowning and suffocating, immobilized by a tentacle. Hotel guests can be seen in front of the aquarium. Quiet music plays in the hall and people socialize with each other in a relaxed atmosphere. The janitor bangs on the glass and screams, asking to be saved, but no one hears him. The creature pulls him to him, and finally he falls silent. Meanwhile, the protagonist climbed the tower, the highest point in the city. The guy tells the system that he thought the system could easily locate the alien. The system says that this monster is unusual, and that it opens its eggs into the bodies of its victims, so it's hard to find. The system says there's a lot of data to process to find it. The hero complains about having to fight all the people with monster eggs. The system disapprovingly says that his skills weren't given to him to make him feel like a superhero. The system says he needs to wipe out all the parasite carriers at the train station to stop the spread. The hero says he wants to do the strategizing himself this time. He thinks there must be an easier way to handle this. He calls the police. A guy tells the cameraman that there is an alien in town who is spreading parasites. The cops decide it's a prank. The hero screams that it's true, and that new monsters will fly out of all the infected, and that the number of infected has already reached 100. The hero hears a ringing tone as the cops drop his call. The operator complains about school kids making up nonsense. Commander Zhao comes to the police station. She is welcomed. The cameraman notices how beautiful she is and stares at her mesmerized. Meanwhile, the police tell them that they have the alien situation under control. At the same time, the main character is driving toward the city's airport in his new Jeep. The system gives him information about the first infected, a scientist from America. The hero asks if it is necessary to kill them. The system says that once infected, they are no longer human, and the hero's soft-heartedness could lead to disaster. The hero grips the steering wheel nervously but answers nothing. At the airport, the man's friends say goodbye to him. It's the infected one the system pointed to. He says goodbye to the girls and begins to walk away from them. Suddenly, he stops in place. His face begins to change. The man is puzzled and does not understand what is happening to him. He starts screaming and spewing green liquid from his mouth. People nearby become frightened and start running away in a panic. Someone suggests calling an ambulance. The hero nervously thinks about the fact that if the man is torn, it will be too late. The girl screams for the infected man to stay away from her. The hero makes a jump with his spear towards the infected as he asks for help. The hero delivers a blow to the man's chest, and he begins to settle to the ground with a loud crunch. The girl asks in shock if the man is dead. He is lying on the ground immovably. The system says the carrier has been killed, and now there are 5 more left. The hero doesn't like that he had to kill a human. The audience notices that this is the master of the spear. They start talking about the spearmaster killing a man and start calling the police. The hero jumps out the window, breaking the glass. People see him escape. The Intelligence Bureau headquarters reports that the spearmaster has already killed 3 civilians. The girl gets angry and says that they thought he was laying low, but he's actually gone to another city. She bangs her fist on the table irritably. She tells the intelligence team to search through the surveillance cameras for the spearmaster. They salute. She tells the others to follow her and heads for the exit. The new one says that the spearmaster has committed a series of brutal murders and is now wanted. It's being furiously discussed online that the spearmaster is not the hero he was thought to be. The hero runs away from the police into an alley with a flashlight. He breathes a sigh of relief. He says he was finally able to get away from police, but the system says there are 2 pieces of bad news for him. She explains that the hero is now being referred to online as a maniac with a spear. The hero is upset and says he hasn't broken any rules before, but now he's in the Federal Wanted Bureau for a series of murders. A character pays for a rental bike from his phone. The system asks why he needs it. The system says he doesn't know the second news yet, and the hero asks what it is. The system responds that there is less than an hour until the next parasite seeding. Next, the action takes place in a hotel. A young guy walks in with a girl in his arms. The girl says he's being cheeky today and he starts kissing her. The girl tells him to stop. He asks what's wrong with her when he sees the change in her face. She replies that she doesn't feel well and her face starts to turn green and change. The guy panics and pushes the girl away from him. She falls down and pleads for help. You can see splashes of green liquid all around. A girl screams as she's pierced through by a spear. The protagonist pulls the spear out of her body. The hero apologizes. The guy next to him starts yelling at him to stay away from him. The hero makes a dash toward the guy and says that he should die too. He looks to land a strike, but someone attacks him with a leg kick. It turns out to be the commander who's covering for him not to move. The hero looks at the suddenly appeared girl with surprise. She and several other policemen aim guns at the hero. The girl demands to surrender. The hero is surrounded by several police officers who point guns at him. The hero grimly considers what he should do, since leaving the carrier alive will kill all the cops. He decides he doesn't have time to think about it and decisively lunges at his opponent with his spear. The cops declare fire and start shooting at the protagonist. The hero runs to the infected guy under police fire. The hero sees police bullets flying at him and cusses. He starts spinning his spear with great speed and reflects the projectiles flying at him. However, he misses a couple bullets that hit his side. He settles down on one knee and makes sounds of pain. The police announce a ceasefire as the perpetrator has been wounded. The system says his body has been strengthened and regeneration accelerated, but bullets can still wound him. The hero complains of severe pain. The commander runs up to him and swings her leg in for a kick. She yells at him to put his hands behind his head. The hero notices that she has tremendous punching speed and wonders what technique she possesses. The girl kicks him with her foot, but the hero reflects her blow. Suddenly they both hear a loud roar. The girl looks in surprise in the direction it is coming from. The guy looks over there too and grudgingly thinks about the fact that they've gotten to the point. That's where the infected guy gets torn up and green liquid starts coming out of him. A monstrous outgrowth bursts out of his torso. The guy yells loudly. With a hiss, a monster emerges from the victim's body. The cops swear in shock and then the monster fully emerges to the surface. The hero declares that a new monster has been born in front of them and tells them to spread out. The girl looks at the monster in surprise. The monster abruptly begins to run with a loud hiss. It jumps on one of the cops as she yells. He attacks the girl and successfully assaults her. The commander says confidently to have part of the squad attack the alien while the rest defend the residence. The cops start shooting at the monster. Many shots are heard. The casings fall with a clinking sound to the ground, doing no damage to the monster. The policemen shout that the bullets did not harm him. The shots only angered the creature, and it aggressively began hissing towards its opponents. It starts screaming and makes another dash for the next victim. The monster bites a policeman as they retreat in fear. The hero thinks about how bad things are for them, if even a newborn monster won't be slugged. The monster jumps from one policeman to the next, biting them. The hero thinks he must have a vulnerable spot. The commander tells the others to disperse and rushes in to attack. A click sounds from her heel and a hidden blade emerges from there. She does a leap and somersault in the air above the battlefield. Down below, police officers are trying unsuccessfully to do something to counter the monster. She lashes out at the monster with force and wounds it with her healed blade. The monster screams in pain, green liquid flowing from its wound. This liquid gets on the girl's uniform and she cusses. She realizes that the creature's blood can corrode clothing, and some of the fabric has already been corroded. The monster leaps at the girl with a roar, preparing to strike. The hero grudgingly says that now she's definitely pissed off the monster and rushes into attack. He grabs the girl and dodges the monster's blow. The hero thinks about the fact that he has now realized where his vulnerable point is. The hero yells at the creature and tells it to taste his spear pathos. He spends a wide swing attacking the monster with his spear. The blow hits the opponent and successfully slices through him, killing him in one hit. The hero thinks about his spear being more effective than bullets. The commander looks at the monster's body and asks what kind of monster it is, and who all the main character's victims were. He replies that they all carried the creature's eggs inside them. The commander thinks about the fact that he is not a killer of civilians. She thinks about the fact that if she hadn't left him behind, the police officers would still be alive. The hero tells the girl that he recommends calling for backup, as there are vectors and their uterus left in the hotel. He walks off in the direction of the hotel and tells her to tell everyone that monsters have a vulnerable spot on the back of their heads. The commander radios for all units to stop hunting the Spearmaster and requests reinforcements. She is told that reinforcements for her are on the way. Reinforcements arrive and 2 helicopters fly to her. A gold star symbol is visible on the helicopters. The girl is surprised to notice that this is a squad that reports directly to the general. At the same time, the hero enters the hotel and the residents start to scatter in panic. The girls fearfully say that a maniac with a spear has come here to kill. The system spotted 6 infected and tagged them for the hero. The hero thinks about the fact that he's sorry, but he's going to have to do it. The villagers flee, and the hero attacks one of them with his spear. Cries of pain and cries for mercy can be heard from everywhere. The hero killed several people and headed for the elevator. The survivors watch him with fear. He's standing in the elevator, and the system tells her he wasn't as pathetic as she thought he was. The hero tells the system to feel free to praise him. He adds that he expects a good reward for completing this task. The system says that baldness would await him for failing this task. The hero decides that he must pull himself together to avoid this. The system says there are vectors found on several floors, which he must deal with, and then deal with the uterus. There are lifeless human bodies floating in a huge aquarium. In the depths, you can see the silhouette of a huge sea monster with tentacles. There were still people in the hall in front of the aquarium. The monster says his children are hungry and approaches the glass. The guests notice that there is a monster in the water and start screaming in panic. The monster strikes the glass with its claw. A network of cracks begins to spread across it. Guests scream that the glass is about to crack and the monster will break through. The monster takes a few more swipes at the glass, shattering it in several places. The guests scream that the glass won't hold and start running away in panic. The glass finally shatters, flooding the room. The people in the water panic and call for help. Underwater, the tentacles head toward panicked victims. The monster attacks the residents caught in the water, killing them. Water pours out of the doors and begins to flood the hallway where people are running. The tentacles begin to grab and pull it into the water. At the other end of the hallway, the main character is running. He thinks of the banquet hall up ahead and heads there. He steps into someone's blood and stops when he notices it. He looks around and sees the scattered corpses of people. He stands in shock at what he sees. A monster appears next to him, holding a girl that begs for death. The monster is huge and has many tentacles. It hisses loudly. The hero realizes that it is the monster's uterus. The system identifies the uterus as a creature from the chaos dimension and assigns it a danger level of C. The hero thinks about the fact that it's finally her turn and waits for the attack from the monster. The womb turns away from the hero instead of attacking. The hero resents her and tells her not to ignore him. The hero says that in that case, he will make the first move. He makes a few jumps on the walls and heads towards the monster. He swings his spear and prepares to attack the enemy. He asks if she's hungry and furiously attacks the monster with his spear. He hits with a kick to the monster's head. There is a loud bang, but the blow doesn't do any damage to the monster, as the protagonist's spear can't pierce its hide. The hero curses unhappily when he sees that his attacks are to no avail. He wonders what the monster's head is made of. Suddenly, the mate begins to swing her clawed paw to strike the hero. She hits the guy and gives the hero a punch, causing him to fly off. The hero looks at the wound he received and sees blood gradually appearing there after the cut. The hero falls to the ground with a loud thud and flies off into a pile of furniture. The monster opens its toothy maw and begins to hiss aggressively at the protagonist. In a rage, the monster begins to smash everything around him with its blows. Furniture flies in all directions. The hero thinks about the fact that her children were fragile compared to the womb itself. The hero holds his hand over the wound on his body. The system says the monster's attack was imbued with poison, so it will take him at least half an hour to recover. The hero grudgingly remarks that he can't procrastinate that long, as she could spread new parasites in half an hour. A helicopter appears in the sky. The hero looks at it and thinks that it must be reinforcements arriving. The hero decides to buy time and lure the monster to the third floor. He starts running and the monster tries to hit him with its tentacles. The hero jumps back and successfully evades the attack of the monster's tentacles, which nearly hit him. He jumps up to the third floor and says he can easily get away from the monster. He runs up onto the roof of the hotel and stops abruptly there. To his side, he hears an order not to move. He turns to see who is speaking. A squad of police officers stands in front of him. They tell the hero to put down his weapon and aim their guns at him. The hero says he's not their enemy, but they don't listen and again order them to lower their weapons. The hero curses and realizes that he doesn't have time to explain anything as the uterus is already behind him. A tentacle appears behind the hero and he raises his spear to attack. He tells the policeman to shoot. The cops yell and start firing at the hero when they see him raise his spear. Bullets start flying towards the protagonist, but he manages to react. The hero leans on his spear and jumps up. Behind him, a monstrous uterus climbs out onto the roof. The bullets that were meant for the protagonist hit the monster, but bounce off the tough skin. The cops are terrified. They don't understand what this creature is. The hero thinks about the fact that this is his chance for an attack on the enemy. While the mate is distracted by the volley of projectiles, the hero leaps at her with his spear. He strikes one of the creature's many eyes, deciding to wound the brain through the eye sockets. His blow reaches its target, and the monster's green blood spurts from the wound. It lets out a piercing shriek that can be heard for hundreds of meters around. The hero doesn't understand why the enemy is still alive if he was hit in the brain by a spear thrust. The hero irritably thinks about the fact that he's already running out of strength because of the poisoned wound. The cops are preparing a volley of grenade launchers. They aim at the monster and prepare to fire. The hero thinks about how grenade launchers aren't a bad option, though a tank would be preferable. He thinks about the fact that the gunmen don't care if the blast hits the hero. The cops start shooting, and the hero decides he needs to get out of the grenade launcher's range. He jumps off the monster's head. The projectiles hit the target, and there is a huge explosion with a deafening sound. The hero looks at the blast zone where clouds of smoke are billowing. He can't see anything because of the smoke. The policeman orders the others to cease fire and remain vigilant. Suddenly, tentacles burst forward out of the smoke screen and head towards the police officers. They begin to scream as the tentacles grab and envelop them. A monster head appears out of the smoke and hisses loudly at the police officers. The monster shoves one of the policemen into its mouth and says it is delicious. Its victim screams. The hero curses and begins to move swiftly towards the enemy. He pushes the cops away to dash forward and protects them from tentacle attacks. He begins to attack swiftly and fend off numerous tentacle attacks on the police officers. However, other tentacles hit the police officers. The hero thinks he can't do it alone, as there are many tentacles. The sound of a helicopter is heard and a shout of retreat is heard. Another policeman yells that they need to maintain their position as the helicopter has arrived with reinforcements. Meanwhile, the monster destroys the defenseless foot soldiers one by one. There is a commander in the helicopter. She is surveying the battlefield from above. The hero notices her and pays attention to her arrival. The helicopter begins firing machine guns at the monster. Bullets hit the enemy and some do damage, piercing the hide. The helicopter keeps firing, and the monster hisses and gets angry about it. The hero asks the system why the uterus started looking at the helicopter, and wonders if she has intellectual problems. The system replies that for a monster it is very smart, and even for a human it is quite intelligent. The hero asks when the next spread of parasites will begin, and the system says 5 minutes from now. The hero tensely swears and yells at the cops to get the helicopter out of here. The uterus begins walking toward the helicopter, each step leaving cracks in the concrete beneath her. The hero yells that she wants to escape in a helicopter. The uterus jumps off the roof in the direction of the helicopter. It's a hard hit. The commander in the helicopter gets a jolt. She hears another loud bang and looks at the dashboard. The uterus in the air holds onto the helicopter with her paws and hangs in the air. The hero thinks about the fact that if she starts giving birth to parasites right above the city will be finished. The helicopter begins to lose control from the sheer weight of the uterus. The hero thinks this is the last chance to stop her, and leaps determinedly towards the monster. He starts flying towards the monster in the helicopter. In flight, he sees the mate wrapping her tentacles around her own belly. The hero is surprised to see this. Several tentacles are sent forward to attack the hero. The hero reflects the attack and wonders why she doesn't attack with all her tentacles at once. He realizes the belly is her weak spot and heads in that direction. The hero spends the reception of the emerald dragon's blow on the belly of the womb and pierces its hide. The spear digs deeply into the monster's flesh, causing the monster to scream loudly. The monster screams, but doesn't stop holding the helicopter. Jets of blood are pouring out of it. The helicopter loses its balance and hits a building with its propeller blades. Police officers observe the situation without realizing what is going on there. The helicopter crashes into a wall and there is a huge explosion with a deafening sound. In the hotel is a girl who is whimpering quietly on her bed. She cries and records a video saying she is in a hotel with a spear-wielding maniac who has already killed many people, and says she doesn't know if she will live through the morning. She asks her friends to put more likes and says it could be her last request in life. She hears an explosion outside her window and is startled. She asks what it was. Suddenly, the window shatters from the impact of a spear and a hero with a girl in his arms flies in. He tells the system to put the spear away and gently puts Commander Zhao down. The girl who was in the room hides. She recognizes the hero as a maniac with a spear. She doesn't understand why he flew in here with the girl in his arms, but she's really scared. The hero asks Zhao Ling how she is, but gets no answer. The girl who is hiding is afraid to give herself away with a sound and covers her mouth with her hand. The hero says he's having trouble bringing her to consciousness and asks the system how it would assess her health. The system says that the girl is badly damaged and that she has no chance of full recovery. The hero asks if there is nothing that can be done. The system says that she can be helped by miracle pills that the hero can get for completing the task with the uterus. The hero asks if she can be saved by the pills. The system replies that they will save her, but notes that they are a very rare item, and it is more profitable to keep them for themselves. The hero gets annoyed and tells the system to give them out as soon as possible to save the girl. For completing the task, the system gives a reward in the form of money in the amount of 10 million, as well as a new skill. Also, his spear improves and becomes a devil's spear. It changes its appearance. The hero triumphs, and his new level is called a second-rate mastermind. In real life, without the system interface, the hero looks silly. He sits there and makes enthusiastic comments. Seeing this, the girl decides it's a completely deranged psychopath. The hero selects a miracle pill from the interface. It appears in his hand. His hands begin to emit a green glow and the pill appears above him. The girl doesn't understand what he's doing and assumes it's witchcraft. She decides that something like this needs to be captured, and pulls out her phone to capture what is happening on camera. The hero directs the glowing pill towards the unconscious Zhao Ling. Green energy begins to be absorbed into the girl's body with a buzzing sound. The hero looks at her and thinks the pill has worked. The girl begins to breathe evenly, and the hero decides she'll be fine now. The hero says he cured her and hopes she won't try to kill him again. This is all filmed by a girl. Her stream gets comments about the Spearmaster. The hero then takes a leap through a broken window and disappears. During the flight, he thinks that now he has lost the feeling that someone is watching him. A fire is burning near the helicopter crash site, with civilians and firefighters running around. A fireman shouts for people to be evacuated as soon as possible. Police officers are leading people away from the crash site. Everyone is running away from the scene. The hero from afar observes what is happening near the crash site of the helicopter. He thinks about the fact that given the force of the explosion, he will now be presumed dead by everyone. The system says he will need 2 weeks to fully recover, and advises him to find a place where he won't be disturbed. The guy says that his new villa will do, and leaves the scene of the fight. The next day, the hero drives a jeep into the upscale private sector of the city. At the entrance, he is greeted by a security guard as he drives by. The hero happily thinks about how he never imagined that he would one day be able to live in such a luxurious place. The hero stands in front of his own villa and admires it. It is a huge building in modern architectural style. The hero enters the living room and says that Fatty Chan didn't fail with his choice of house, and that this is not a house but a real dream come true. The hero examines the interior of the house. Everything in it is new and gleams with cleanliness. The character examines the windows and chandeliers of the house and marvels at their quality. He lies down on the couch and doesn't know what to do now. The hero thinks about the fact that he doesn't feel at home here as everything is too perfect. He picks up the remote and decides to fill the emptiness of the house with the sound of the TV. The TV is showing the news. They talk about what happened in the hotel, talk about the huge number of victims, and say that there is still an investigation to find out the details. The hero grumbles unhappily that no one is talking about how he defeated the monster, and says the reporters aren't scrutinizing the situation enough. The hero stares at the ceiling and thinks about how tired he is after everything that has happened. He stares passively at the ceiling and does nothing. Gradually he begins to fall asleep, his eyes closing. The sound of footsteps of a whole crowd of people can be heard. There is a loud repeated knock on the door of the protagonist's villa. The hero wakes up and does not know who decided to come to him. The knocking on the door does not stop. He heads to the door and says he's on his way to open it. From behind the door, someone calls him a maniac with a spear and asks if he's home. A lot of people come through the door. They ask if he earned his villa by killing people. The hero holds the door against the crowd and replies that they were monsters, not people. His window breaks and something flies in. This object falls to the ground with a clatter. It turns out to be a creepy human head. It talks to the hero and asks why he did it. The hero is startled and looks at his head. The head says he had a family and children and he killed him. The hero says in desperation that it was for the people and to save them. He hears another knock on another window. That's where the mate of the monsters he killed appears. People start calling him a murderer in unison. People start climbing out of his door and says he's a murderer. Dozens of hands come at him. The hero is told that he must pay for what he has done. The hero panics and shouts to the people around him to stay away, but they keep pulling their hands toward him. The hero screams as the maelstrom of arms pulls him in whole. Just then he wakes up, still on his couch in the villa. He jumps up sharply from the couch as he picks up what had been a nightmare. He exhales in relief, realizing it wasn't real. At that time, a notification arrives on his phone. The hero takes his smartphone in his hand and reads the message he received. There's a correspondence there discussing an upcoming reunion. The hero smiles, even though he thinks the participants in the correspondence are not very smart people. The hero gets up and decides that since he's on vacation now, he might as well go home for a while. He's texting that he's coming to the reunion. No one is particularly happy about this. The hero thinks about the fact that he has not seen any of them for a long time. The hero remembers one of the girls, Zhang Yixiao, and wonders if she will come to the reunion. The hero rides in his jeep to the settlement and hums a carefree song on the way. The system says that he has no musical ear or voice, so his singing only tortures him. The hero replies that he is in a good mood, and that he can't wait to finally see Zhang Yixiao. He tells the system that he needs to heal his wounds anyway. The system tells him he has 2 options. A nice school friend, and a strict commander. The hero is outraged and asks why a commander he's only seen once would fly in. The system chuckles snidely. At the Intelligence Bureau, Zhang Ling is asked if she is sure she wants to return to work so soon after being injured. She replies that she is perfectly fine. She thinks about the fact that she doesn't remember what happened. The commander recalls how she lost control of the helicopter. She then remembers an explosion but can't remember anything specific. She reflects on the fact that it's strange that after all this time she didn't have a scratch on her. The commander asks what video her subordinate wanted to show her. He holds out a tablet with the video. The video shows a green light streaming around the hero. The girl is surprised by it. She reads the comments that support the Spearmasters and realizes why there is no damage on her body. She's quite thinking about the fact that he saved her, and not just her, but everyone in general. She is asked if the distribution of this video online should be blocked. She replies that it is not necessary, and that it is not necessary to censor discussion of this topic. Her ward nervously says it's against the general's orders. The girl sternly tells him to follow orders and she takes all the consequences. He agrees and leaves. The girl is in a good mood. She thinks about the fact that she and the Spearmaster happen to be on the same side. The hero gets out of his jeep and thinks about the fact that he will finally see the girl. He is wearing expensive clothes and perfume. The system asks why he's dressed up like that, and if he's getting ready to propose to his girlfriend. The hero is indignant and says that this is nonsense. At the entrance to the building, a young guy calls out to him. He waves to the hero and calls him by name. It's Ning Chen. He asks the hero how he's doing. The hero approaches an acquaintance who turns out to be a former headman and says he still looks like a nerd. He says that he is a simple teacher in the village and notices that the hero has already bought a car. The hero is embarrassed when the headman praises him. The boy is escorted forward. The headman says they're waiting for him. He greets old acquaintances who ask if he still remembers them. The hero looks around the sides of the room. He looks around the visit looking for Zhang Yixiao. One of his acquaintances asks who he's looking for, but immediately adds that he knows who he's looking for. The hero asks if Zhang Yixiao has come by yet. The head teacher says she's unlikely to show up today. She knows about the reunion, but she's been very busy lately. The hero gets upset, but tries not to show it. Here another acquaintance approaches him. He says that he has nothing to do with Zhao Yixiao and should forget her. It's Kun Kui. He says that the main character doesn't deserve her and that she was the most attractive girl in the class. The hero thinks about the fact that he hates this guy. He remembers that he had been hitting on Zhao Yixiao all through his high school years, but to no avail. The hero aggressively approaches the bully. It's heading towards a fight, and the people around him realize it. The headman gets between the two guys and tell them they're having a celebration and not to let Kun Kui spoil the mood. The latter pushes the headman aside and says he has a beef with the school because it occupies his land. The hero gets angry and sternly tells Kun Kui to get behind the headman. Kun Kui grabs the hero by the collar and tells him to stay out of it if he doesn't want to get one. He makes fun of the guy's clothes and thinks they're really cheap. The hero smirks and answers nothing. He punches the bully in the chin so that his cigarette flies out of his mouth. From the force of the blow, Kun Kui flies a few meters away and falls to the ground with a loud sound. Those around him were surprised to see the hero deal with the bully. The people in the next room are trying to figure out what happened there between them. At the same time, the creaking of opening doors is heard. People notice that someone has come in. A girl enters the room, stepping confidently over the bully slumped on the floor. It turns out to be Zhang Yixiao, the protagonist's old love. The hero blushes, embarrassed, and looks at the girl. Kun Kui, lying on the floor, tells her to be careful with the hero, since it's like the devil has gotten into him. The girl says that Kun Kui must have bullied him. The hero hesitantly approaches the girl and awkwardly greets her. The people around him are watching what is happening. The girl responds to the greeting and asks how the hero is doing. The hero's heart starts beating faster. She looks at the guy and says he hasn't changed at all. He continues to blush. He replies that Zhao Yixiao has remained the same as well. The hero thinks about the fact that everything has stopped for him. In the background, the people around him are chatting among themselves. The hero does not hear the conversations and the noise of glasses. For the rest of the evening, he only looked at Zhao Yixiao and didn't pay attention to the rest. The action then takes place at night, near the village in which the protagonist is located. Something starts happening in a cemetery nearby. A blue, ghostly energy with a quiet buzzing sound begins to emanate from the ground near the coffin. Suddenly, someone's human hand bursts out of the grave soil. It turns out to be the alien Xiaoqian. The creature looks like a girl in traditional attire. There are magical lights dancing around. The alien looks at the settlement in the distance and starts walking in that direction. The girl comes to a house where the lights are still on. At the window, she sees a guy looking at his phone. He doesn't notice her. A guy is drinking beer and contentedly watching videos of obscene content. Voices are heard from his phone. The door to his room is slightly ajar, but the guy doesn't notice it. The shadow of an alien girl appears on the floor of his room. A guy asks who she is. She replies that she is lost and asks if she can stay the night at his place. Thoth blushes and readily accepts the girl at his place. She sits down on his bed and tells him it's past their bedtime. The boy looks at the alien girl in love. The guy thinks about how he is unspeakably lucky and starts to get down on the girl. He says he's going to be gentle with her. She lies down, smiles at the guy, and calls him young master. She thinks about how all men are really the same. Suddenly, there is a man's scream as the alien changes appearance and attacks him. People are starting to leave the class reunion. They're already a little drunk. Some people suggest going somewhere else. The hero is surprised that so many people came and that everyone had a good time. The headman agrees with him. The protagonist, Zhang Yixiao, and the headman are standing side by side. There is an awkward silence between them. The headman says he's putting the girl in the hero's charge, and it's time for him to run for the bus. The hero asks if he needs a ride. The headman refuses and says he'll get there on his own. He promptly runs away from the couple. The hero looks at Zhang Yixiao and she looks at him. They say nothing and are embarrassed. They begin to blush, unable to say anything to each other. The hero awkwardly suggests the girl already go, and she just as awkwardly agrees. The headman walks down the street and thinks about how he envies this couple. He watches the protagonist's car drive away and thinks about when he can find his soulmate. He decides that he has gotten very confused, as he is a simple village teacher without a house or a car. He decides to go home and start preparing for his lessons. Suddenly, the girl in front of him settles to the ground, making the headman a little scared. He worriedly asks what's wrong with her as the girl reaches out to him with her hand. This girl looks pitifully at the guy and asks for help. She's actually an alien. Meanwhile, the hero and Zhao Yixiao drive up to Yixiao's house. The girl says she's surprised that the main character remembers where she lives after all these years. The character recalls how he once waited for her outside her house every day before school. He even remembers her home phone number but has never dared to dial it. He notices that the girl is still using the keychain he gave her. They both start talking at the same time and interrupt each other. The girl tells him to be the first to say what he wanted. The protagonist is swayed by the girl's face, making her even more embarrassed and addressing her by name. He says confidently that he likes her and that he wants to be with her. The girl smiles and blushes. She's waiting for a kiss from the protagonist. The one bends down to kiss Zhang Yixiao, but suddenly the system intervenes and has a message for him. The hero ignores the system and it flies off outside the car. The system says it will come back later as the notification is not too urgent. The alien girl and the headman walk into his apartment. He apologizes for the fact that he has everything very modest. The girl says it's getting late and suggests he go to bed already. The headman tells her to lie down on the beds, and he will make his own bed on the floor. The girl is surprised, as she had expected otherwise from the man. She grudgingly thinks about the fact that they're already in his bedroom, and that the guy is making a saint of himself. Both go to bed, the girl on the bed, the headman on the floor. As the headman falls asleep, the alien wakes up and decides it's time. Her eyes burn ominously. On her hands grow long and sharp claws. The girl approaches the headman and decides she needs to suck all the life force out of him. She reaches for him with her claws. Suddenly, the guy rolls over on his other side and starts talking in his sleep, addressing the students. The girl gets scared and jumps back into bed. She lies there thinking about why she was scared. The headman woke up to a noise. He starts to approach the girl, who is pretending to be asleep. She thinks he's finally showing his true self when he reaches out his hand to her. But instead, he covers the girl with a blanket and tells her it's cold today. He says she's a poor woman and that you can read the pain in her eyes. The girl can't figure out what's wrong with this guy. Her eyes begin to close and she slowly falls asleep. Finally, both sleep unmoving in the same room. The girl in the dream recalls that her mother told her that if a man and a woman sleep in the same room, there will be children. She sees children who are surprised to discuss that their teacher has finally gotten a girlfriend. The girl turns around, trying to see who's talking, and realizes it wasn't a dream. She shrieks and pulls away from the children. The children also scream when they see her. A teacher enters the room, who has come running at the sound of screaming. He asks what is going on. He yells why the kids aren't in class and they run out of the room. He apologizes and embarrassingly explains to the girl that they are on the premises of a rural school and that he is the only teacher here. He says that breakfast is on the table and that he will be back after school. The girl is puzzled. He turns to the children and says that he seems to need to give them more homework. The girl looks at him. She wonders what elementary school is like and doesn't understand why they are dressed so strangely. A little time later, the teacher thinks about the fact that incomprehensibly from where the girl appeared, organically blended into his work with children. She played with the children and entertained them in every way possible and helped him teach them. She appeared very innocent and inexperienced, which surprised the teacher. He had to explain basic, all too familiar things to the girl. She didn't look at the teacher disparagingly because of his material status, unlike most girls. When she played the flute, he felt as if he knew her as his own, though the girl never spoke of her own past. A little later, the teacher was coming with milk tea, which he wanted to treat the girl with. He thinks she will be happy like a child. As he approaches the house, he sees an ambulance and a crowd of people gathered. There, the woman tells police officers that she had not received any information from the man and decided to visit him, after which she found him in that condition. They believe the man died on the evening of the 8th. It's hard to believe since his body had time to dry out. Some are comparing it to the undead. The teacher begins to think and reminisce about the evening of the 8th. He starts to think about the fact that this is the same night he met the girl. He looks at the wrapped, withered body outside the ambulance. From beneath the cloth, the dried hand of a corpse is visible. The teacher is shocked. He can't believe the obvious result of the date comparison. From shock, he drops the glass of milk tea and it spills onto the pavement. Ning, still not realizing what was happening, decided to step aside while the medics carried the injured body into the ambulance. The police were trying to find out what was going on. Nina comes to realize that this is not just a coincidence. The guy begins to suspect that the girl he brought to the school and is an unclean person who killed a man. Ning hurries back to his house to talk to his girlfriend. At that moment, someone starts calling the guy's name from behind the house. There's a crowd of guys standing near the entrance to the local school. They've already managed to mark the walls with demolition paint. A guy with an older man at the head of the crowd beckoned Nina to talk to him. Ning Chen was confused as to why Kun Kui and the chairman wanted to see him. The guy with a cast on his neck mockingly decides to warn Nina that he plans to start work on the school site tomorrow, and will have everything demolished. Ning, seeing some guy continuing to paint the walls, indignantly interjects. Nin takes Kun by the shoulders and screams for the guy to come to his senses, because this is a school for kids. Kun lifts Nina up by his shirt with a light motion of his hand. He says he doesn't care what the guy thinks and asks him to get off the property. With a sinister smile, the guy adds that otherwise he'll bury him alive with all the kids from that school. Kun puts the boy down by holding him down. Ning decides to ask the chairman to come to his senses, since this is the only place where poor children could study. The chairman, with a sullen face, reminds Nina that it is tomorrow on this place, and will begin construction of the sanatorium, and he does not care about the opinion of the guy. The chairman slowly steps aside. Nin once again tries to get the man's attention. Kun at this time tries to tease the guy, adding that he knows about the girl in Nin's house. Licking himself, Kun moves closer to Nin, and explicitly hints that he would think twice about giving a girl a night out tonight. Once again, tauntingly, he finishes the sentence by saying that he would consider leaving the street toilet exactly. Nin stands in a stupor. The guy clenches his fists hard from his helplessness and anger, but he doesn't dare to answer Kun. Near nightfall, Ning returns home. He asks the girl not to be afraid of what is happening. Sitting on the bed and holding the girl's hand, the guy smilingly asks to temporarily stay with Zhang Yixiao, and once he solves all the problems, he will immediately take her away. The girl looks at Ning, not understanding why the guy decides to leave her alone. Ning tries to explain the reason to Xiao Qian, but the girl lowers her head without listening. She clarifies that the reason is because of her deception. Ning looks at the girl questioningly. The guy roughly guesses that Xiao is the monster that killed the man. The girl, through tears, tries to explain that she is not really human and has to suck the life force out of men. Covering her face and wiping her tears, she adds that it was her grandmother who made her do it. Xiao was taught from childhood that if she didn't kill, she would be killed. Ning gently wipes the tears from Xiao's eyes. He asks the girl to calm down, for he understands her. As she holds hands, the girl begs for forgiveness and not to be kicked out of the house. Ning continues to comfort the girl, saying she doesn't blame her. Ning, with a serious face, asks the girl to leave, for his house is about to become unsafe. Holding the girl by the shoulders and getting much closer, the guy asks her to trust him and move in temporarily until he solves all the problems. The girl cries again. Xiao asks to hear a single request from her. Through tears, the girl smiles. She asks to become Nina's soulmate. After all, she is ready to wait for a guy all her life. Ning smiled in return, accepting the girl's request. He liked Xiao himself. The girl hugs the guy. Nin adds that that's what they agreed on. Several knocks sounded at the door. Xiao got up from his chair and decided to go to the door. Xiao was standing outside the door, looking at the floor in confusion. Yixiao said with a smile that she had been waiting for the girl, inviting her to come to her apartment. After closing the door behind Xiao, Yixiao immediately decides to ask where her brother Ning Chen is, to which the girl informs her that the guy has some business to attend to and can't come to them yet. Withdrawing her gaze, Xiao adds that Ning isn't really her brother, but a soulmate. Yixiao puts her hands on Xiao's shoulders with a smile, saying that she realized that right away. Xiao opens the door to the next room and suggests that she go to bed early and go out tomorrow. Xiao looks around the room. Xiao, seeing the night sky, missed Ning Chung. She only cared about him at the moment. The next day began with Sun vigorously swinging his broom. He called this technique the secret technique of the Devil's Spear. At this time, the woman continues to hang the clothes out to dry. In the background, Sun continues to wave his broom. He thought that this method would keep him in shape. Raising his broom above his head, the guy cheerfully announced that the internet was waiting for his imminent return, because he couldn't disappoint his fans. The guy's thoughts were fixated on something else. Sun slowly pulls his phone out of his pocket. Blushing, the guy revisits the picture with his new girlfriend. Sun couldn't be happy that he could finally start dating his love. A woman pulls out a small cat mask from a basket of wet clothes. Sun's mother thinks that such things are the reason why her son still doesn't have a girlfriend. Sun angrily takes his cat mask from her hands with words for her not to touch his stuff. The woman calmly hands back his mask. Sun shows his mother the phone, adding that it has long been in high esteem among the girls. The woman stood puzzled. The guy decides to count on his fingers which girls already appreciate him as a person. But Sun could only remember 2 girls. When the woman sees the photos of the girl, she is embarrassed and immediately asks to bring her to her home. Sun's mother had already planned to marry the boy in the coming year. The guy didn't quite understand which second girl his mother was talking about, since it was just him and Yixiao in the photo. The boy turns the phone around to see for himself. There was a picture of Yixiao and Xiao on the phone. They posted a picture of them eating ice cream together. Sun decides to make sure he shows the right picture. He refers to Xiao as Nina's girlfriend. The system decides to compliment that she forgot to notify him of the important moment. Flying closer to the guy's ear, the system explains that Xiao is no ordinary girl, but is actually an alien. Sun was shocked by such news. Hearing this, the woman strokes her son's head. She doesn't understand what alien Sun is talking about. A call comes in on the boy's cell phone. Standing back, Sun picks up the phone. With a serious face, he asks if the girl is okay, to which Yixiao says she is fine. The girl is in the city center with her eyes still trying to find Xiao. She explains to Sun that she lost Xiao and can't reach Ning. Sun, assuming that this might be a problem, abruptly starts running. He assures Yixiao not to worry because he will find him. Jumping into his car, he preemptively tells his mother that he's leaving on business. Sitting behind the wheel, Sun had a sea of thoughts. He reassured himself that Ning was responsible and wouldn't let this happen. There were already several demolition trucks outside the school. Kun, shouting at his subordinates, explains that this lease has cost him a lot of money. He asked who would pay for it. The employees were at a loss for what to say. The workers tried to say something to Kun. One of the guys added that there was still a person in the building and they could not demolish the school. One of the workers, pointing his finger at the teenager, suggests that the man has already left the building and they can proceed to demolish the school. The teenager standing next to the children tried to calm everyone down, for he hoped that their teacher Ning would solve the problem, and they could start classes elsewhere. In the background of the school, the teenager added that their teacher was just finishing packing up all the school supplies and they would be able to study anywhere. A girl standing nearby was crying at what was happening. At this time, Ning was still inside the school, finishing packing all of his belongings into his large backpack. Ning looked around the room, trying to remember what he might have forgotten. There were still a few books on the table that he needed. Nin notices that there are markers left on a neighboring table. He decides to pick them up as well. One of the workers asks Kun to double-check the building for people, and then finally get to work. Kun was outraged and then started to climb on a bulldozer, preparing to demolish the building. The employee asks Kun one last time to stop. The boy does not listen, and then slowly starts walking towards the school. When he got close enough, he swung the bucket at the window where Nina could be seen. The boy was already on his way out of the school. But Kun doesn't notice the guy, so he smashes the window with all his might. The shards fly towards Nina, breaking his glasses. A heavy thump sounded, the building quickly collapsing. The children notice a huge lump of dust. The children, from realizing what has happened, begin to call out for their teacher. Many of them cry. The dust begins to disperse, and a man's hand holding a bag of crayons appears from under the rubble. The whole building was completely collapsed. Two women in the countryside look at the smoke rising into the sky. One of the women decides to ask what happened there, to which she gets the answer that the old school is being demolished. Xiao is standing on a pole in the center of the village. Her face was very angry. The women continued to discuss the demolition of the school. They could not understand where the poor children would study. Xiao abruptly pushes off from the pillar, rapidly moving towards the school. The women with bags on their backs were greatly surprised at this. They did not immediately realize what had happened. The pillar breaks from such force and falls to the ground. The women screamed in fright. Xiao was already moving across the rooftops as she continued to head towards the school. She had a bad feeling. The excavator was still near the broken part of the building. The roof and part of the wall had slid down, creating a huge hole in the middle of the school. A teenager and her children sat next to their teacher, Ning. They cried at such a loss. Ning was lying motionless with numerous scratches on his face and broken glasses. The children tried to cheer him up by telling him that they would definitely start doing all their assigned lessons. Standing off to the side was the angry chairman. He was addressing Kun with questions about how they would handle such a problem. The guy was nervous and didn't know what to do about it. The employee added that a large number of people already knew about it. Kun, still nervous, chewed on his finger. He pondered on how to scuttle the incident. Looking at one of the workers, a thought popped into his head as to how to solve this problem. The man looked questioningly at Kun. Kun kicks the employee to the floor with all his might. The guy calls him a murderer. He continues to accuse the man of not taking precautions, which is why it all happened. Leaning over the worker, he decides with a snide smile to give him a chance, hinting that he has time to dispose of the corpse and then they won't testify against him. The man looked at Kun fearfully. He didn't know what to do in this situation. Kneeling before Kun, he cries for mercy, for he didn't want to go to jail. Ducking his head in front of Kun's shoes, he adds that he is a decent man and has no power to do such a thing. Kun, with a tired face, turns to the worker's foreman. He asks the men to explain exactly how it is done. The brigadier grins at the crying children. He silently waves Kunu away. The teenager-led children were outraged that their teacher was being taken away by unknown people. At this time, Xiao appears. She puts her hand on the teenager's shoulder, asking her to take all the children away. With a rather imposing gait, Xiao headed towards the crowd of workers. Her hair curled in a stream of accumulated anger. Simultaneously, a woman's foot and heels is shown out of a blue car. It was Yixiao, running towards the school. The girl wondered to herself what could have happened at the school. One of the workers stretches out his hand in front of the girl. He warns the girl that at the moment the school is undergoing construction work and the entrance is forbidden. Xiao, not listening to the man, rushes through the fence, pushing the men away. One of the men twisted his leg and fell to the ground. The fencing opens up from the walls standing on the sides. At that moment, a giant ball of green essence rises into the sky. Xiao stopped and covered his face with his hands. The workers were also puzzled at what they were seeing. Xiao, holding onto the wall, was surprised to see Xiaoqian. Xiao was floating in the sky, and all the people standing around her were shouting. The worker who refused to help crawled away. A man covers his face against the strong wind. He was also frightened by what he saw. The brigadier, still in the sky, asks to be spared. Kun, trying to get out of the tornado of people, asks the people below to help him. Stones from the destroyed school are also sucked into the tornado. Kun adds that he has a lot of money and will give it all if he is released. One of the stones flies out of the airstream, bouncing into Xiao's voice, causing the girl to fall to the ground. Kun is already tearfully asking to be released with the words that he will generously compensate for Ning's death. Xiao had little interest in this. She decides to end it by pulling everything in the air towards her. The men with all their might begin to be drawn to each other. The rocks around them still swirl in the strong current of the wind. But Xiao was resolute. With her clawed hand, she continued to torment people, muttering Ning Chen's name to herself. She planned to finish all of this as soon as possible and join Ning. She could see the intense pain in her eyes. A huge hand in a green glow abruptly squeezes everything in the tornado. A loud crunch sounded, making everything around Xiao turn black and red. In the center of it all, the silhouette of a girl could be seen. Xiao was lying at the main entrance, drops of black liquid falling beside the girl. The girl was unconscious. Drops of liquid continued to fall from the sky, hitting Xiao's shirt as well. At this time, Sun arrives, rapidly approaching Xiao's unconscious body. He was greatly concerned about his girlfriend's condition. Taking Xiao in his arms, he headed for safety. He was glad that the girl was okay and he had time to help her. Putting the girl down near the wall, he asks her to wait for a while he deals with the situation. Taking out his staff surrounded by a purple glow, he stands in front of Xiao. The system adds that Xiaoqian is an alien from the Liao dimension. The system was outraged that Sun didn't decide to attack right away. It felt that innocent people had been killed and they should destroy the alien as quickly as possible. Sun put on his cat mask, was puzzled as to how it had come to this. After all, she was Ning Chen's girlfriend. The system immediately stops the guy from such thoughts. It leads her alien and quite dangerous for ordinary people with what, and agrees Sun. Sun took to the sky with a light movement. He planned to intercept the alien as quickly as possible and deal with it. Jumping over the rubble of the neighboring buildings, he climbs behind Xiao's back. His thoughts were on preventing more casualties from this alien. Xiao got as close as possible and swung his staff at the girl with all his might. Xiao, with tearful eyes, didn't even pay attention to Sun. She didn't care about much after all this. Sun notices with the edge of his eye the girl's face. He couldn't realize what he was seeing now. Quite surprised, he realized that these were Xiao's tears. Sung tries to stop within an inch of Xiao, as he is unable to do so. Sun manages to divert the staff, only hitting Xiao slightly. The girl was shocked by such a blow. The green glow disappears around Xiao, and she falls to the ground. Sun lands next to the girl. The system was outraged that Sun had stopped, for this was the only chance to destroy such a serious opponent in one blow. Sun, with a serious face, thinks he did the right thing, since he's not a machine but a human and wants to make sense of the situation. Xiao sat at Sun's feet with a rather lost face. The guy tries to find out what happened and what made her do it. Xiao looks at Sun and decides to tell him that she knows him, since Ning Chen had previously shown pictures of him. With a smile, she adds that to Nina he was a good man. Changing her face, the girl back starts crying, because she is disappointed in people because of the death of her loved one. Sun, with a frustrated face, decides to find out where Ning Chen's body is now. At this time, the sky is heavily overcast, from which a heavy downpour begins. Xiao holds Nina's head in her lap and mourns the body of her lover. The system decides to support Suna by giving her condolences. She adds that unfortunately they don't have a pill that can bring a person back from the other world. As Xiao continues to cry, she adds that Ning didn't keep his promise, and they never got married, and also now she has no one to take care of her. Putting her hand on Nina's face, she remembers how she met him. To her, he was the best person she had met in the last 500 years. Sun's eyes were also getting wet, blaming himself for what had happened. He couldn't believe he'd let this happen under his nose. Turning his head away without showing tears, Sun clarifies to Xiao if there is anything he can do to help the girl. Xiao replies briefly that no, her fingernails turning back into claws. She adds, finishing this one herself by extending her claws to her neck. Sun, hearing this, immediately turns to Xiao. He tries to prevent this, but fails. The children are nearby through tears, trying to understand what the girl is doing now. Xiao soullessly fell down beside Ning. A smile could be seen on her face. Xiao reflects one last time that now she can be with him forever. The writing is on the wall, and in the background the construction of the new school is well underway. There is a grave under a lone tree by the school fence. Sun and Yixiao stand in front of it. A girl lowers flowers by the grave. The initials of Ning Chen and Xiao Qian can be seen on it. The girl with the sad face assumes they are there together and happy. Sun adds that he thinks the same way. The thought in his mind was that Yixiao was just as at risk now. Sun with a serious face believes that he will protect his girlfriend at all costs. At this time, they take each other's hands firmly. Yixiao suggests that Sun come to her house for dinner because her mom has been wanting to meet a guy for a long time. Sun is embarrassed by the offer, adding that he has to leave for work. Sun thought in his mind that he needed to get stronger as soon as possible and protect her and his loved ones. The pair slowly head for the exit. The system nearby thinks that humans are pretty stupid and emotional, and also die pretty quickly. After Ning Cheng and Xiao Qin died, Sun left the village. He wanted to become able to stand up for Yixiao and keep her out of danger. In the aftermath, Sun began to perform all the tasks of destroying the wicked. In Tokyon, he destroyed an alien using a sword. In New York, Sun slew a giant ape with his powerful fist punch. Visiting Changshan, he solved problems to protect nature. Pretending to be a deity, Sun punishes a worker for leaving his saw on. The worker tearfully begs for mercy. Over such a long period of completing tasks, he had accumulated a large number of rewards at his disposal, and his sword and spear skills had greatly improved. Sun had also advanced just as much on the branch of improvement through the system. His cultivation level was just as advanced as he had disappeared without a trace. In addition to all of the above, Sun was nicknamed the Master of the Spear and became very popular. Fan clubs even started to appear in his honor. But there was also the flip side of such fame. People, due to his popularity, began to mass sell products with his image. Sunu really liked this kind of attention, and it affected him a lot. He partially started to get cocky. Standing on the balcony of one of the skyscrapers, he realized in his mind that behind his amazing image was an ordinary guy with access to the codes of life. A hand in a gold glove with 5 different stones on each finger is seen against the sun. A purple-colored man sat on the roof of one of the many buildings. He was complaining about the weak people, and how it was just another monotonous world for him. Sun was standing around the corner, ready to act. The system was also ready for any eventuality. Putting his hands in his pockets, Sun slowly approaches the man. The guy decides to ask why the Destroyer thinks people's lives are boring, since his life is just as meaningless. The Destroyer turned his head in surprise at Sun. He was amazed that someone knew him in this world. The man tried to find out what coalition Sun was from. The system noticed that it was a destroyer from a purple planet with a level S. Squinting, he declares that he doesn't really care who Sun really is. With a smirk, he shows his hand with a huge glove. He adds that he will soon destroy this world at the snap of his fingers. Undeterred, the destroyer snaps his fingers, expecting the usual effect of this action. People from downstairs continue to take pictures. The cat passes by without reacting. The destroyer was shocked that nothing had happened. In his mind, he wondered how it could be. Sun stood nonchalantly behind him. The destroyer angrily clicks a few more times. He was amazed at the fact that he had spent a lot of time on these rocks. But nothing happens. Once again, snapping fingers, the glove starts to break. After all, it was just a cheap analog. Sun looks at the destroyer and decides to show off his glove. He asks if these are the stones the man was talking about. Unperturbed, Sun adds that the gauntlet can perform any task and further better than his glitchy system. The destroyer looks at the guy with an angry look. He wasn't happy about being outmaneuvered. At the moment, the destroyer jumps up and pounces on the guy, screaming. Sun, with the words that it's time for the destroyer to go home, snaps his fingers. From this, the destroyer's fist stops halfway, and the man's body slowly disintegrates. He couldn't understand how such a thing was possible. In parallel, remembering how recently a girl had asked to take a picture with him, the destroyer is nonchalantly photographed with a girl dressed up as Sun Yichen. With a shout, the destroyer disappears completely, vanishing into the sky. Sun stands across the room and watches it. The system was puzzled as to how Sun was able to get the destroyer's glove off. Sun adds that there is one weakness that no man can resist. Taking off her eyelashes and throwing those on the floor, Sun slowly heads towards the exit from the roof. Coming home, Sun decides to relax and take a long break from her daily routine. Lying on the couch, Sun decides to contact the system to clarify what the unusual award was about. With a strong glow, the system prompts you to enter the development branch. Sun, being inside the system, wonders what all the mystery is for, to which he gets an immediate answer that the guy doesn't know everything that is hidden in the system. The system decides to clarify where all the energy gained from each destroyed alien goes. Sun writes everything down in his notebook. He's surprised at this turn. Abruptly dropping the notebook, Sun angrily asks to finish this and finally tell the gist of it all. The system, accompanied by confetti and other highlights, announces that it has moved to the next level, and they now have new options. After dispelling the fog, a huge pink toy machine appears in front of Sun's eyes. The boy walks up to it in surprise. Sun puts his hands against the glass and wants to play the machine. Behind the glass are various strange objects that look like relics. The system explains that the guy needs to scan his fingerprint and 100,000 will be deducted for one game. Sun is puzzled as to why he has to pay for this game, with an acerbic smile, adding that it was too cheap to pay that way for his status. The system also asks to raise the guy's head and look around more closely. The guy raises his head in surprise. In front of Sun's eyes stands a huge skyscraper. The guy was surprised by such a building in the system and did not understand what it served for. At the entrance to the tower, the guy reads that it's a tower of heroes. Once inside, the system explains that the first floor is the storage area where all of his weapons are located. The system calls this floor the exhibition floor, adding that the other 100 floors up are reserved for the submissive Suna aliens. Sun decides to clarify that he has the power to take control of the aliens. The system explains that the aliens who obey him can become his assistants. In the outside world, they do not upset the balance, because they are in this tower. Taken aback, Sun thinks that if he'd known sooner, he wouldn't have killed the destroyer, as he was pretty strong, and would have looked great in his tower. System stops Suna by adding that not all aliens can be subdued. Realizing that the guy won't remember anyway, he suggests studying this in parallel with concrete examples. The system looks around without finding the guy. At this time, the machine at the entrance was twitching strangely. Sun had already started to play him, trying to get the heavenly mantle that added 10,000 to strength and other aspects. But the sphere with the mantle falls, hitting the corner. The boy was outraged at the missing sphere. Sun continued to play for quite a while, and a large number of different things formed around his feet. But he was still resentful that he couldn't get the robe. In the real world, the guy was just twitching his arms, mumbling something to himself. Someone is trying to call the guy's phone. This time he got lucky and the robe went where it should. The guy is relieved and starts screaming, thinking that the day was not in vain, while the phone kept ringing. Sun turns her attention to the cell phone lying nearby. Picking up the phone, the guy calls his interlocutor Fat Chan, asking him how he's doing. Sun is talking on the phone with a smile. He notices that his friend Chung wants to go into business and spend all his money on it. While picking his nose, the fat man is happy to have the main stars of the upcoming movie on his program tonight. But he still thinks he can go it alone. Covering his face, Sun thinks this is serious business for him. So the guy makes the decision to go there with him. The first take of the movie begins in the set. A girl in a robe walks between the filming equipment, slowly starting to remove her robe. At this time, a woman from the movie crew comes running in. She is surprised that SUO is in front of her since she is already filming. The girl is also surprised because she just came to the set. The woman doesn't know what to say to the actress. Arriving at the set, everyone is filming the bathtub scene. The director and the whole crew are fussing around the bathtub. A man with purple hair sits in the bathroom. Unsuspecting, he continued to wash himself. The man decides to turn around, wondering where he might have gotten to. It surprised him a lot. The woman and the actress were surprised at how beautiful the girl in the bathroom was. They couldn't believe their eyes. The cameraman tries to explain to the director that they made a mistake, to which the man waves it off. The director asks to point all the cameras and keep filming, and also point all the lights on her. He was happy with the scene. A man in the bathroom covers himself with his hand against the strong light. At this point, he decides to stand up to his full height. The film crew and the actress were surprised at this sight. The director opens his mouth and declares that it is against all laws of nature. A man with a serious face clarifies why they are all here and whether they wish to kill. He calls himself the ruler of Lanling and asks for their names. The director was surprised by such a statement about the killers. The screenwriter adds that they have nothing of the sort. The rest of the crew still stands puzzled. The director abruptly starts clapping and says it's a great acting job. Pointing his finger at Lan, he declares that he will be in his next movie and take the male lead. Lan didn't understand what the director was talking about or what the role was. On social media, they have already announced the new movie Adorable Smile with a cover of Lanya. Lan came out of the blue and instantly won the hearts of millions of fans by introducing other projects. Passing by the crowd in Hengshan City, the girls greeted the guy by name, also declaring that they loved him. The girls showed their placards and cheered Lan's presence, but the guy didn't share such warm feelings with the crowd. Lan publicly tells people to work the fields better or stay home with the children, to which the public reacts approvingly and supports him. One of Lan's assistants states that investors will arrive that day, and he will have to attend the meeting. The guy was not very happy with this arrangement. Lan silently steps aside. His assistant bids farewell to the audience, adding that this is food for thought. The crowd continued to cheer for the movie star. The assistant reiterates that Lan needs to meet with the investors. Lan's thoughts wanted to go back, because he was already tired of this world. The girl, covering herself with her cap, declares that the Dolin is her soulmate, and they will definitely meet again. At this time, a limousine arrives at the entrance, from which Mr. Chan steps out. Sun, standing next to his friend, states that he looks like a very serious uncle. Sun assumes that his fat friend decided to invest just because there are a lot of beautiful actresses in the movie. Chan immediately declares that this is a serious movie, and there are only serious stars, even supporting ones. In Sung's opinion, this whole complex was built for just one movie. One of the workers invites Mr. Chan to follow him. At the entrance, they are greeted by a producer with a rather unorthodox appearance, Dijijin. The producer asks the girl to meet Mr. Chan. Fatty was excited about it. The girls, upon hearing this, sweetly greet Mr. Chan. The fat man blushed a bit. He stammered the same greeting and asked to meet his close friend's Sun. Chan points his hand to where Sun was standing a second ago, but he's gone. One of the girls suggests Mr. Chan to star in a cameo role. The producer supports the idea and says that everything will be fine. Sun at this time goes behind the set, clarifying with the system whether she's accurately spotted the alien and where it might have come from. The system confirms this, adding for Sun to present the dial and look at 2 o'clock. Before Sun's eyes stood Lan stroking a white horse. Guy is rewiring the system to see if he's looking at the right person. The doe, continuing stroking the horse, says she understands the one and is just as eager to leave this place. Sun looks at Lan and thinks he doesn't look like a villain or even a problematic person. The system begins to hint that this is why the point of the assignment is not to eliminate him. Sun realizes the hint and is excited. He also wants to subdue this alien. He wants to add to his collection and revitalize his endless tower of heroes. At this time, there are girls taking pictures with the fat man. Chan resented Sun for abandoning him. Chan notices soon and is surprised to see a guy interested in him among the many women. Sun approaches Lan with a smile, asking him to step back and talk privately. The assistant declares that this is Mr. Chan's friend and Lan should be more polite to him. At this moment, the assistant similarly removes the mask from Lan's face. Sun notices how handsome Lan's face is, noting that he's much prettier than any actor with a lot of plastic surgery. Lan asks what Sun wanted him to do. The assistant adds that he leaves them to their private conversations. Sun was still amazed at such beauty. Sun, holding his chin, realizes that this is the ruler of Lanling. Sun realizes with embarrassment that they are very similar because he also prefers to work in a mask. Sun points his finger at himself with a confident face. He declares that he must be with him from now on. In Lan's mind, the guy in front of him was offering to be with him and make him an even bigger star. Lan lowered his head, already realizing the kind of people around him. In this world, he realized that it was a typical producer who wanted to make a star out of him. Sun, without trying to explain everything, states that from now on Lan will be able to live in his endless tower of heroes and use any weapon. After all, such a warrior should be with him and show himself as a warrior. The veins on Lan's forehead began to show anger. He took it as the director offering to live in an expensive house and providing him with toys. The system, realizing this, hopelessly lowered his head. Lan was bubbling with anger beside Sun. Sun finishes it off with a smile, asking if he agrees. A blazing aura formed around Lan, demanding that he shut his mouth. Getting very angry, he declares that he will rip out Sunu's tongue for his words. Lan's forehead was covered with veins, and his eyes showed intense anger. Sun doesn't stop and puts his hand on Lan's shoulder. The guy interjects, asking how he feels about his proposal and if he wants to see the tower first. Lan clenches his fist, holding himself back. Lan tightly clutches Suna's wrist, throwing him with all his strength. Sun is greatly surprised. He is already in the air. Lan raises the boy above his head in a frenzied manner. Lan throws that one to the side, but Sun manages to do a few feints and land on his feet in front of the man. Sun accepts the challenge and gets into a fighting stance. He offers to test who has the better kung fu. Lan was surprised that Sun was familiar with martial arts. Puzzled, Lan decides to find out why instead of defending his homeland. The guy offers him such vile things. Lan turns his back to Sun and gives him the middle finger. Sun looks at the man questioningly. Still in a fighting stance, he wonders why the man just walked away. The system sighs languidly. Into a mouthpiece, a staff member announces to all actors to go to the dressing room and begin preparations. There is a bustle on the set. All the people are actively preparing for filming. The man adds that the next scene will start soon. One of the girls takes Suna's hand. She tells him not to shy away from the guy as his place is already taken care of, and he will have to withdraw. The man explains Sun's role, that he will play one of the commanders in charge of the city's defense, pointing his finger where he should stand. At the same time, the girl touches the guy's face, wondering how good his skin is. Mr. Chan is supporting Sun, asking him not to lose the defense of the city. Next to him comes the same producer waving his hand. Sun was outraged by this, calling Chan a fatty. He was unwilling to play in this spectacle. Announce the beginning of the first scene. Actors begin preparations for the defense of the city. Sun stood confidently on the stone wall. His clothes consisted of armor with gilded shoulder pads and a blood-red cloak. Sun smirked. He remembered his lines. He was confident in his abilities. After all, defending the city was more important to him than life. An enemy army with numerous cavalry is approaching the entrance to the castle. At the head of the entire army was Lan. The guy realized that his enemy was the protagonist. Sun understood that he would have to lose and lower his weapon. His character's only function was to realize the full potential of the protagonist. Picking his nose, the guy thought it was really pathetic. The actors standing nearby were puzzled as to what Sun was talking about. The woman sitting next to me emphasizes that their wall was very nicely done. The woman compliments that they will only have enough for one side, thus saving most of the money. Chan only observed the scenery in Sung's back. Chan did not know that it was Sun. He was pondering whether the latter was offended by this venture. This was the time when Lan and his cavalry were approaching the main gate. A mask was worn on the man's face. The director stands in front of the actors and tells them that on his command, everyone should start the attack and follow Lana. The girl standing next to her quietly mouthed that she was very close to Lanya. The guy doesn't react to that. The girl pulls out her pink phone and starts filming the one from the back. She planned to sit at the same table with him on a date. At this time, the director comes up to her and yells loudly for the actors to be more professional and put their phones away. The guy asks if the girl knows how to ride a horse at all and if she will spoil the take. The girl angrily asks him to leave her alone and continue shooting. The girl declares that there is nothing complicated about riding, as she has seen it many times on TV. The man asks all the actors to get ready for the shot, after which the entire cast moves closer. After starting, all the horses abruptly start running towards the castle. Sun, living up to his role, asks his subordinates to close the main gate and prepare the archers. 1Z standing nearby waves back. Preparations are being made on the wall. Sun watches with a serious face at Lan's fleeing cavalry. In the moment, Sun's face changed, and he was surprised to see what was happening in the center of the crowd. The actor standing next to him didn't know what to do. The director sitting behind the screen was outraged by Sun's actions, asking that this actor not overact. At this point, another of the assistants comes running in and asks for attention to the problem. The director turns around indignantly, followed by the other people behind the monitors. In the center of the cavalry, a girl's horse spurts from which she loses control. In a great flood of masses, she falls off her horse. The doe hears the fall of a man from which he takes notice. He jumps off his horse and runs swiftly to the girl. The actors were puzzled as to what was happening on the set. Lan lands next to the injured girl and looks at her. Taking the girl by the head, he examined her for wounds. In her eyes, Lan was the hero who asks the girl if she's okay. The girl, bewildered, thinks this is the best moment of her life. The girl blushed. Lan thought she was all right and threw her on a neighboring horse. He also notices that the girl's horse has gotten caught on the scenery and is kicking around a lot. The doe catches up to his horse and heads swiftly towards that horse. He orders the others to disperse as soon as possible. The actors were at a loss as to what was happening and what sound they were now hearing. At this time, the wall slowly begins to crack. People on top of the building start to panic, because the cracks have already reached their part. Renewing his sword, Lan almost reaches the snagged horse. The doe manages to cut the bridles, freeing the enraged horse. He turns his head. People were running away from the crumbling wall in fear. On his horse, he manages to bounce aside from the falling scenery. The wall was rapidly falling on the confused crowd. People didn't know what to do. The director took it upon himself to think that this was the end for them, and nothing could help them. Chan is trying to break through the people behind his friend. The director covered his face with his hands, trying not to look at the horror of it all. Chan cries, for his friend has just stopped being poor. The screenwriter and producer notice a strange shadow in the sky. Chan opens his eyes and also notices this strange man heading towards the wall. People standing in safety assumed it was Superman saving the masses. Chan still tearfully sees hope in this. He calls John Doe a domestic superhero. It was Sun, and he couldn't be happy that he had taken that very heavenly robe. He manages to tie up all the actors with light movements and lift them into the sky. He adds that his ability to fly makes him a perfect master of the spear. Slowly, all the people in the building were safely landed next to the camera crew. They were happy to be rescued. Flying back up to Sun's castle with one touch prevents further destruction of the scenery. Sun asks Lan to continue evacuating all the people while he holds the wall. The doe supported their savior, galloping on his horse after the rest of the injured. The system tells Suna to stop showing off, because he'll only be able to hold the wall like that for a few seconds. Suna's hand gradually starts to twitch. Sun quickly thinks over what he should do in this situation. He had planned to avoid such a big loss among the cast. The idea of using a vaporizing punch pops into his head. He decides in one swing to hit the wall and vaporize it. He thought there would be nothing left of the wall after the blow. There is a strong blow to the middle of the wall from which a large ball of dust rises. Sun, thinking that everything is ready, laughingly calls himself a master of the spear for whom there are no unsolvable tasks. The system is screaming for Sun to wake up, since he hasn't done anything useful. The dust cleared and Sun turned his attention to the wall. There was a huge hole in the wall, but the wall itself continued to fall on the crowd. Sun starts holding the falling wall with all his might. He asks the system to get the superpower pill, to which the system immediately started searching. The system instantly applies the properties of the superpower pill, making Sun feel a surge of immense power. Sun rises up above the wall with incredible speed. He hits the wall with a multitude of his punches to destroy the wall. A few rocks do fall on the defenseless people. They only have time to scream. At this time, Lan arrives and destroys the falling rocks, saving the defenseless people. The man asks to get out of here quickly and not to panic. Sun continues to destroy the wall with a series of blows, causing it to collapse rapidly. Sun declares with a serious face that this is his only chance and he can't screw up. Huge holes appear all over the wall from such powerful blows. The people who had already moved a safe distance away were glad to be alive, thanking the Spearmaster. They were also surprised that the wall had simply vanished. The director is still crying, asking the heavens for further investment in his movies. The surviving people couldn't be happy to be saved. They shouted words of encouragement to the Spearmaster. Sun slowly lowered himself to the crowd in his trademark mask. People stretch their hands to his feet and call him the master of the spear. The system decides to ask if the guy is happy to hear this, to which Sun decides to say nothing. But not holding back his emotions, he blushed with the words that he was very pleased to hear such things from people. The system pounded a fist on Sun's head, asking when he planned to tame Lan Lin. Sun takes his head in his hands and reminds them to be nice to him, since he's a folk hero. People notice the walking Lan Lin out of the thick smoke. Lan Ling walked holding 2 more injured people. He nonchalantly walked towards the crowd. After putting those on the ground, the guys couldn't be happy that everyone was still alive. Lan Lin approaches Sun. The people realize that in the background of the Spearmaster, they have completely forgotten about Lan Lin. But he has made no less contribution to saving people. The girls standing next to Chan couldn't help themselves from the beauty of the Spearmaster and Lan. Chan's face changes in the moment and he remembers that none of this matters to him. After all, his friend was never found. Chan also realizes that Sun was at the very top, but he never saw him after the castle collapsed. Chan begins to realize everything, which makes his face look even more horrified. The girls don't pick up on what's going on. Lan also realizes who's in front of him because of what he calls Suna, the guy with the strange proposal. Sun notices that Lan is not a stupid man, and immediately realized who was in front of him. Lan holds out his hand to Sun with the words that until he finds a way to return home, he is willing to help save people. Suna is touched by this, and with tears in his eyes, he calls Lan his brother. Taking him by the shoulder, he thinks they are of the same blood and should stick together. After all, the greater the power, the greater the responsibility. Sun shakes his new friend's hand firmly. Raising her hands, Sun adds that as long as they are at one, humanity will be able to sleep in peace. The people standing around support them with loud shouts and clapping. Somewhere deep in the forest, an unknown man is digging a deep hole. A crow watches what is happening. At a point, he bumps into a strange obstacle. Removing the ground, he observes a wooden box. The man stooped down, was glad he had found it. He thought that after all this, he would be rich for many years to come. A stream of purple energy begins to flow from the wooden box. The boy steps aside in surprise. The guy doesn't understand what's going on. He thought it was very strange, but still reached out for the box. A half-rotten hand bursts out of the box and grabs the man by the throat. The unknown man doesn't even have time to scream. With tremendous speed, the man is thrown into a nearby tree. A strange man dressed in purple quickly emerges from the coffin. He takes the unknown man by the throat. The man asks him to stop and not to kill him. An unknown demon bites a man's throat, causing his veins to burn with a red glow. After a few minutes, the unknown man walks away, leaving the man devastated next to the tree. Police immediately surrounded the area. One officer calls the man a treasure hunter. It was not clear to them how the murder happened. The medics put the victim on a stretcher and carry him away. A girl standing nearby is reporting from the scene. The man stands up abruptly and jumps on the girl, biting her neck. The girl sitting at home who saw the report was horrified by the event. An elder passing by declares that it is a regular zombie. The girl did not understand what kind of zombies her grandfather was talking about. The girl decides to question what kind of zombie it is. In her mind, she already realized that she would not be able to just relax at her grandfather's house. But Jan's grandfather was happy about this event because he would have the honor to prove himself. Sun and Lan raised their hands after saving people. After the shooting of the new movie, all the main sets were destroyed. The crowd was really looking forward to Lanya's return, but the guy hasn't made another public appearance since. Sun sat in his hotel room and watched the recent news report. He had little interest in it. Sun sat nonchalantly on the couch and continued to think of himself as the great and terrible anonymous hero. Abruptly, Sun began to laugh. He was waiting for the system to reward him for recent events. In front of his endless tower, Sun's level was upgraded to Master at peak, and he received quite a few different armors and weapons. An unusual object in the form of a white elephant dragon egg also fell into his hand. Sun was surprised at the reward. Lan comes out of the Infinity Tower greeting Sun. He wonders what the object in his hands is. Sun himself did not realize what the object was. He decides to shake the egg sharply. The egg begins to crack slowly from the shaking. Sun and Lan were surprised by this, as a strange horned creature begins to appear in front of them. The white elephant dragon baby is fully hatched in front of them. The animal jumps sharply onto Sun's face, something he certainly didn't expect. Sun threw the shell and pulled the pet away from his face, then questioned the system if it was definitely a reward. The guy didn't understand what use such a small pet could be. The system with a smile asks the guy to call the pet by name, and then he will behold the natural form of the animal. Sun agrees to this. Taking the pet, he raises it above his head with the words "elephant dragon." After a quick transformation, the pet becomes 100 times larger, from which it falls directly on Suna. Lan begins to laugh at this turn of events, noting that this world has its charms. Sun doesn't quite understand his friend, asking him to help him. The system sighs at the fact that his interceptor is acting rather strangely. Most of the time, in his opinion, interceptors are supposed to be unflappable and tough men. The system adds, something about the way Sun is behaving is not at all like the above. At this time, Sun is struggling to get out from under the pet. At this time, someone is knocking outside the door trying to call out to Aisin. Xiao decides to open the door, apologizing for it, since she's been knocking for quite some time. Yaksha watches as Sun rolls over the floor, screaming at her to stop spoiling herself in front of him. The girl didn't quite realize what she was seeing now. Sun is stony with shame. He realizes that he forgot about his date with his girlfriend Yixiao. Yixiao closes her eyes in shame. She adds that she didn't see anything, and will go better prepare food in the kitchen. Sun was depressed by this turn, because he wanted to remain a hero in her eyes. Sun realizes with a smile that his girlfriend is the best in the world. At this time, someone also tries to enter Sun's house. His friend Chung jumps to Sun abruptly. With tears, he was mortified. After all his money had been invested in that very movie, and now he had nothing at all. Sun lets Chano hug him. Stroking him, he calls Chano fat, asking him not to cry over such small things. The guy was really depressed, but Sun blushes at what his friend is doing. He demands to stop doing it to him. Chan, with a smile, decides to check his muscles by running his hand over his torso. He observes the steel pectoral muscles. Chan is convinced that his friend is the master of the spear. During this time, Lan is watching everything, calling it a live reality show. While in the room with the beach, he wonders why he's watching this and where he even is. Lan realizes that he has been in the Infinity Tower for days now, and has done absolutely nothing in that time. He remembers that Sun had given him permission to do anything he wanted in the building. The doe pulls the pet's tail in anger, he adds, feeling like a caged pet. In pain, the pet jumps from Lan's arms. The guy apologizes for his actions, still holding the pet by the tail. The system angrily asks both of them to shut up because he's working now. The pet lashes out and strokes its tail. The doe, encouraged, gets to his feet, asking if there are any assignments available for him. The system tells him about recent events in Xiangxi County, and that a village has been attacked by zombies, but he can't detect them on his radar at all. Lanya, with a serious look, suggests that the zombies in question could not have come in peace. Lan decides to go and deal with these zombies. The pet supports him and sets off after him. The system sighs. It realizes that now it will have to watch out for more than just Sun now. At this time, Lunshan village was completely destroyed and dehumanized. There was a sepulchral silence in the village after the recent events. Residents of a neighboring village came to see what was happening. They noticed that the village used to be quiet, but it was not clear what could have happened here. One of the volunteers says that there are rumors that the settlement has been attacked by zombies and that they are unlikely to be able to help anyone. The rest of the crowd supports the idea of returning. The guy with the goofy looks reminds them that they came with him, which means they will defeat all those zombies. The crowd wasn't too encouraged by this, as they realized the guy only had a hoe. The guy laughs loudly after making this statement. Strange human sounds are heard from the house near where they were standing. After that, zombies start coming out of the darkness. A second later, a mob of zombies were already heading in their direction with soul-wrenching screams. People were greatly frightened by such a sight. They didn't realize how they would have to deal with it. Seeing all this, the guy who wants to deal with it starts running away one of the first. At this time, an elderly man and his granddaughter were walking to the Yang family's estate. Walking through the broken streets, the girl remarks that she is surprised that their family estate is so mysterious. The man nonchalantly continues to walk ahead. The man decides to add that his granddaughter has yet to see their main secret. Coming to one of the old buildings, an elderly man stops in front of a coffin. The girl decides to ask her grandfather what they came here for. The man shows his hands with a suggestion for her to look more closely herself. A man pushes the coffin lid with a strong movement of his hand, causing it to fall nearby. The girl notices a secret passage inside the coffin. She was greatly surprised. The man asks to keep up, quickly heading inside the coffin. The girl didn't like it much. She was worried that it was very cold. She didn't understand what her grandfather could store in such a place. Descending a huge spiral staircase, the man says they have finally arrived. The girl took in her face and was greatly surprised at what she saw. A huge man covered with a cloth opened in front of her. Numerous chains stretched to his feet. An elderly man nonchalantly approached closer. He adds that for them it is a story that has been going on for centuries, namely the fight against wickedness. The man didn't want their legacy to end, and today was the day he would introduce his granddaughter to the craft. Taking the bell, he wishes to introduce the girl to his dead warrior assistant. After the oath is recited, the dead warrior is covered in green flames and the chains begin to slowly disintegrate at this time. The dead warrior appeared in front of the girl. It was a 2-meter tall man in red armor covered with seals and chains. The girl is surprised at how big the man was. The dead warrior's eyes light up red after all this. The girl asks him if he has been resurrected. The elderly man confirms this by adding that now he even follows his orders and is ready to fight all the evil. A girl touches the armor of a dead warrior and thinks they can take it with them and go to war on a mob of zombies. The man couldn't be happy that his granddaughter had grown up and was ready to go to war against the zombies. A small group of military personnel has landed at a safe distance from the village. At this point, the men are divided into 3 groups, and their task is explained. The 3rd squad is assigned to protect the survivors from what the elder was surprised by. The blue-haired girl at the head of the entire squad demands to follow her. A man who has already been on special operations is indignant that he is led by some girl, because she could continue to sit quietly in the hall of the capital's headquarters. The girl standing at the cliff in her thoughts was glad that she was able to visit this special operation. She wanted to see that very person. At this time, Sun being at his dojo sneezes a few times. He thinks someone is remembering him. Meanwhile, the village itself is in shambles, with soulless bodies of zombified people walking the streets, several of them trying to finish off a dead person. Several zombifieds hear a rustling in a small house. They all head swiftly to find out what the noise is. A woman and a child were hiding in the cabin. The boy fearfully decides to ask his mother if they will become like the others. The woman tries to reassure the child that if they sit quietly, nothing will happen. Pressing her son closer, she adds that they just need to wait until morning. At that moment, their roof breaks, from which the woman screamed, frightened. With the zombifieds screaming exhaustedly trying to get to the woman, there were quite a few of them. The zombies had completely surrounded the lodge and almost destroyed its base. Those who couldn't walk tried to crawl to their victims. The dead men managed to get to the woman's back, from where they start ripping her sweater off, scratching her body. The woman hides the child behind her body. The boy is crying. Numerous zombified hands reach for the woman. A woman with tearful eyes pleads not to be afraid of her son, for everything will be all right. One of the zombified breaks through the wall behind the woman and swiftly flies towards her, trying to bite her. At that moment, a huge axe flies towards the zombified man. With light axe strokes, the dead warrior cuts through all the zombified near the lodge. Seeing his mother's wounded body, the boy cries heavily. The woman squints her eyes as she realizes the complexity of the situation. A girl and an older man slowly approach the terrified couple. They notice the survivors. The girl with a smile asks if the boy is okay. A man with a serious face looks at the couple. The boy crying reaches for the girl. He tries to explain that his mother was hurt. The girl tries to reassure the boy, telling him that he is safe and he shouldn't worry. Behind the elderly man stood the very dead warrior. The dead warrior turns his attention to the wounded girl. His eyes light up red at the sight of danger. The boy moves away screaming from his mother. He was very frightened, from which he kept crying. The girl strokes the boy's head, calling the warrior by name and adding that this is their ally, and he will help. The boy points to his mother, pointing to her wounds. The girl was distraught because she didn't know how to help the woman. The woman begins to scream violently in pain. She wriggles in hellish agony. The boy tries to call out to her. A woman with tears in her eyes looks at her son one last time. At the same moment, her pupils disappear, turning into soulless flesh. The second she does, she pounces on her son without realizing what she's doing. The elderly man manages to react in time, pulling out his wooden sword. The girl covers the boy's eyes, causing him to scream loudly. A man whizzes by. With a light motion of his hand, he slaps the woman's head, causing her to continue growling for a while longer. Her body slowly begins to fall to the ground. Towards the end, she manages to smile at her son. The boy rushes to his mother with pain in his eyes. He was greatly distressed by this. The boy sat next to him for a while longer. The girl standing next to him silently examines the rest of the dead. The girl decides to ask her grandfather if they can bring the woman back to life, since the man has already managed to take control of the dead warrior. The man lowers his head and replies briefly that he can't. She also adds that there are many levels of zombie decomposition, and the woman belongs to the very first one, which means she can't get her mind back, conventionally as a dead warrior. The man is headed in the opposite direction. He thinks he can't change anything. The girl clarifies what they should do with the child. The man believes that the boy should find a safe place by himself and wait there. He also adds that the boy will be much more dangerous with them. The boy continues to cry over his mother's body. At this time, Unknown people come out from behind the house and ask to give the boy to them. The girl looks at them in surprise. Walking towards the girl was Commander Zhao and his squad. At this moment, Sun and his friend Lin were moving among the trees. Sun explains with a smile that they have almost reached Luncheon Village. He also clarifies if his friend is tired. Lan adds lightly with a puff of breath that he's not tired, as Sun is moving slowly enough. The leaping doe calls himself a military man, and this kind of movement was like a normal trek for him. Sun indignantly declares that the one is too fast and actually he's the hero. The system flying nearby states that it still can't locate the zombie leader and most likely Sun will go unrewarded. Sun states with a smile that he doesn't care about the reward. He wants to help people. As they approach the cliff, Lan calls out to Sun, for the battle has already begun without them. Sun is puzzled and catches up with Lan. Sun watches as the military and yet unknown people fight zombies. Sun assumes it is a battle between the military and sorcerers. The system corrects him and says they are fighting against a common enemy. But gradually the Zobirovani clamp some of the survivors against the wall of one of the houses. The military say they are surrounded and are no longer able to cope. The girl continues to shoot at the zombies. She asks one of her subordinates when help will arrive. The girl continues shooting at the zombies. She asks one of her subordinates when the help will arrive. At this time, the girl is trying to fight back with her fists. She feels that her grandfather spent too little time on combat training. The elderly man once again casts an explosive spell. He adds that he didn't expect such a serious horde of zombies. The girl looks questioningly at the one. She was trying to understand what her grandfather meant. A grandfather plants his granddaughter on the shoulder of a dead warrior. He thinks someone has amplified the entire crowd of zombifieds. The man knows that waddling zombies only progress to the walking stage when they have a leader. This inspires the elderly man, and he declares that his granddaughter will soon have her own zombie sidekick. The dead warrior was embarrassed by this. The girl clarifies if it is the zombie that she necessarily needs a helper. At this time, in one of the village houses, someone is rummaging through things. One of the zombified helps put on his leader's jacket. It was a zombie with intelligence. He puts on a biker jacket. As he also decides to wear a cap with Mickey ears, zombified ringleader Xuan Kui looks in the mirror and admires his appearance. At this time, the roof of the building collapses from an elephant dragon flying by. Leader Kui was angry at this disrespect. Sun demanded that the pet fly more carefully. Out of anger, the ringleader Kui chastises the two heads of the zombified. The military with the dead warrior was still trying to fight off the crowd of zombifieds. An elderly man informs the military that their leader is nearby, but they lack the strength to resist him. The commander reminds them that there is a quarter of an hour left for help, clarifying what the man's plan is. The man kicks the zombified man in the head with his foot, saying that he has no plan as they are surrounded. The girl notices Suna's pet. She declares that this is the kind of helper she would like for herself. All the survivors notice the pet. Sun asks them not to panic, for he has come to save them and solve this problem. Sun apologizes for being late and asks to follow Lan to safety. At that moment, Lan jumps off the pet. The commander notices Suna and realizes that this is the man she was looking for. Sun, with a serious face, declares that he'll take it from here. The doe in the air declares that he was born to fight. On his face was the very same mask. The survivors all declare that the Ankh is very handsome, and the dead warrior gives a thumbs up for the man's appearance. Suna was really pissed off by this, as Lan had once again ruined the whole picture. Sun points his finger at the crowd of zombies and demands that the elephant dragon burn them all to the ground. Gaining air in his mouth, the elephant dragon begins to incinerate all the dead beneath him. The surviving humans were stunned by such an immense power. The head of the Yan family named Hani heard a noise from a neighboring building. He thought the spearmaster had come to his senses. The old man ran to the neighboring building. He knew that the boy's body was not easily broken. He remembered that a medicinal bath had to be taken for 24 hours to get rid of the corpse poison. Hani noticed the protagonist and the girl next to each other in a neighboring building. The old man was surprised. Hani giggled happily. Grandpa stepped aside. He decided that if the Chinkin girl could handle treating the guy, she would not get a corpse. Sun was sitting on the floor in his savage clothes. A little to the side stood a girl smiling to herself. The interlocutor told the guy that she knew he was a spearmaster. The protagonist was worried about being found out. He thought that he had not said anything to the girl. Chinkin told her interlocutor that she had not forgotten her savior. She added to the guy that she had paid him back today. The girl told the boy her name and said she was from Yanzhou City. At the same time, she returned to her home for a vacation. Sun pushed his hand off the floor and got to his feet. The girl told him she wasn't interested in studying zombies. The boy concentrated. He decided to himself that he couldn't contain his laughter any longer. Sun decided that his body couldn't be broken by some zombie. At this time, the girl Zhao from the Intelligence Bureau was walking towards him. The guest didn't realize there was a guy in front of her. She bumped into him. The protagonist looked at the girl in surprise. He didn't understand what she was doing here. Zhao looked at the guy and thought it was very good that Sun was fully awake. The interlocutor started the conversation. She told the protagonist not to hide as she couldn't report him yet. The girl conversationally reminded the guy of his companion named Do. Sun became very worried he remembered his friend. He was afraid that the Do might have been injured. The protagonist started running all over the house looking for his friend. His companion was very surprised. An excited Sun turned the whole house upside down to find his friend the Do. Sun even opened the lid of the well to find his friend there. He called out to him loudly. In search of the Do, the protagonist even went into the chicken coop to look for him. Sun ran outside and shouted pitifully that Do was still to him the most important of all people. The distraught protagonist decided that something bad might have happened to his friend. The Do's voice suddenly sounded. He calmly rebuked his friend for making a noise. The protagonist was very much surprised. He couldn't believe he was seeing his comrade now. Sun was in system space. He hugged the little elephant dragon and his friend Do. He was glad they were all in one piece. Sun asked, with excitement, did the zombie ringleader manage to escape? The interlocutor told the protagonist to at least get dressed first. The protagonist looked down at himself in surprise and realized that his leafy clothes were already falling off of him. 5 minutes later, the protagonist was sitting in the gazebo with his friends, fully dressed. The protagonist, sitting on a chair in front of the table, said that after he passed out, the Do and the elephant dragon also returned to the tower. The system strictly said that people should back off when she spoke. There is no one to help them any other time. Do asked the system if they could go after the zombie leader after Sun had recovered. Virtual Assistant replied that he didn't have enough knowledge about zombies. The main character told his friend cheerfully that Old Man Yang is an expert on zombies, and he himself can ferret out information. After that, the guy accompanied by his companions walked into the Yang family's living room. The main character took a paintbrush, and with the help of paint began to draw something concentratedly. Sun was drawing very insistently. He wanted to show something to his companions. The Yang family's housekeeper watched the boy's drawing with great interest. He decided that the protagonist was talented. Sun handed the economist a large piece of paper and said this is what the zombie leader looked like. The man showed his interlocutors the portrait and told them all to take a look. The old man showed everyone present the portrait of the villain that the main character had drawn. Honi looked at the drawing and decided that everything looked very abstract in the image. The girl looked at the portrait of the villain and decided that it was necessary to enter this data into the database of the Central Intelligence Bureau. The girl cheerfully told her friends that the main character has bold calligraphy and amazing skill. The system thought she had created energy waves during the battle Sunya. They could now track the villain. After that, the system told the protagonist everything in detail. He listened to her with interest. The protagonist decided to share the information with his companions. Sun informed everyone present that his intuition told him that the zombie leader would be heading to Yanzhou City. Honi looked at the map. He said that the zombie squad had passed the densely populated city of Lunjiang and advanced through the mountains to Yanzhou. The granddaughter told her grandfather that there was a point of rebirth called Thunderclap on the Lunyan Mountain. Honi shouted fearfully that the zombie headmaster has a gold level, so he is going to the mountain to raise more of his level to flying yaksha. Everyone present was very surprised to hear about a level called flying yakshi. Honi told that the flying yakshas feed on human souls. They have limitless supernatural power. The old man added that when they get there, it may be too late. The girl listened very attentively and wanted to say something of herself. The protagonist with a smile told his companions to worry, and he had a plan. Sun commanded his friends that they would get to Thunderstrike and finish him off. Everyone headed for the exit. At that time, the leader of the zombies was on Lunyang Mountain. Everything was very dark and gloomy. There was an abandoned monastery on top of the mountain. A staircase led up to it. Gray lightning shone all around. The ringleader at this time stood on the summit and summoned souls to him. They swirled around him. The villain was completely absorbed in his action. The number of souls flying around him continued to increase. Zombie leader's eyes glowed red. He decided to try to revive the dead. Under the influence of magic, flying souls began to inhabit the people lying in their graves. The dead came to life and together they rose from the earth in unison. They headed for the zombie leader. A great number of animated warriors with weapons marched down the mountainside to its summit. The protagonist and a group of his companions prepared to go into battle. For them, it was the debut of the Interceptor team. After half an hour, the protagonist, along with his friends, turned into a group of zombie exterminators. They wore carnival headdresses on their heads. Zombie exterminators were riding in a car truck. There were soldiers sitting next to them. The car, along with the protagonist's group, was traveling along the road to Lunyan Mountain. Suddenly, the car stopped. Someone shouted to the passengers that they had arrived. One of the soldiers didn't understand what their passengers were playing at. He had a lot of suggestions for that. A soldier ran up to his commanding officer and said that they had come up to the mountain climb. Everyone had already gotten out of their vehicles. The subordinate informed his superior that the entire squad was in position, ready to begin the inspection. The girl took off her headgear and said that everything was fine. The girl told the head hero that her men would destroy the remaining zombies and ensure the safety of the civilians. She added that she was leaving the fight on the mountain behind Sunim. The protagonist, along with his friends, confidently told the interviewer that he would live up to her expectations. The system told the protagonist that he had a good plan. She wasn't sure if it would work. Sun threw off his headdress and said that there was a Zhao Lin girl near the mountain. At the top are her men in battle positions. He added that he would take down the ringleader himself. The system was surprised at this response from her master. She didn't believe that Sunya would have it so easy. The protagonist and his companions flew to the top of the mountain on an elephant dragon. Sun commanded confidently to his magical beast to fly towards the top of the mountain. Slonadrakon had a hard time getting a bunch of people on him. He was tired as a dog. The granddaughter asked her grandfather if it was too hard for a magical beast to lead them. Hani answered the girl that riding a physical animal, it's not like riding an ordinary beast. The doe looked sideways at the sky with excitement. He said that the clouds were thickening and their battle would not be simple. After the elephant dragon brought the people to the mountain, they all came down from it. There was a ladder going high up near the altar of Lunyan Mountain. The people who arrived looked at it with excitement. Honi said with excitement that the history of this altar goes back centuries. Now it had become the home of a zombie leader. He decided to use a special skill to curb the villain. The old man put Sun Dynasty blood on his sword. This was to enhance its properties. Honi commanded his granddaughter Chinkin to draw a demon execution talisman. The girl excitedly told her grandfather that she would. She began to draw something on the paper. The old man stood in the magic circle. He shouted to his colleagues to protect him from the zombies while he prepared himself. The doe replied that he would help Honi. The protagonist surveyed his surroundings with suspicion. He said everything around was very quiet. Sun jumped on top of the elephant dragon. He commanded the doe to protect the Yang family. The boy yelled that he needed to find the leader of the zombies. The Chinchín girl watched with great excitement as the main character climbed up. The doe told the Yang girl not to worry. He added that the protagonist could be trusted. Suddenly, something sharply caught the doe's attention. He looked at the girl carefully. The doe looked closely and noticed. That Yang was unknowingly drawing a talisman for a dead person on a piece of paper. The protagonist was flying his mythical animal at the time. He noticed that there was no one on the altar. The boy flew farther and farther away. He thought to himself fearfully that there might be an ambush from above. The protagonist noticed a black cloud being launched in his direction from somewhere. Sun managed to dodge and pass the black cloud in time. He continued flying onward and thought happily that he had been carried away from danger. The protagonist landed on an elephant dragon on the ground. He saw a huge monster in front of him. There was a bunch of zombies standing around. They were drowning heavily and standing on top of each other. The main character saw the leader of the zombies sitting on a throne. There were many dead bodies around. The ringleader looked angrily at the protagonist. Fire burned in his eyes. Sun looked angrily at his opponent and said that he should be taught a lesson as soon as possible. Sun rushed with his spear riding an elephant dragon to attack the zombie leader. Sun rushed on horseback to attack along with his spear. The villain at this time was sitting on the head of a huge demon. The demon leader at this time silently stretched out his hand to the side. He decided to repel the attack. Sun on a huge run-up in flight prepared to pierce the huge demon with his spear. The huge monster swung around and threw a punch with all his might towards the protagonist. Sun flew off from the powerful blow and fell to the ground. There were puffs of dust around him. The protagonist began to come to his senses. He brushed the dust off with his hand and prepared to stand up. Sun raised the elephant dragon on one arm and said that he had underestimated him. The guy thoughtfully asked the mythical animal how he was feeling. The elephant dragon showed with his whole appearance that he was very difficult and upset. Suddenly, the sky got very dark. Bright lightning flashed. There were terrible swirls. The protagonist looked fearfully up into the sky. He realized that thunderstorm was now approaching him. Sun commanded his mythical beast to come to his senses soon. The protagonist grabbed his spear and rushed to attack the huge demon. At this time, a loud bang sounded and bright pink lightning appeared from the sky. The demon leader at this time stood looking up. He noticed that the lightning was headed toward him. A bolt of lightning sharply struck the huge demon. Zombies flew in all directions from it. A powerful lightning strike completely incinerated the huge demon. There was a bright glow all around. The protagonist covered himself with his hand in fright. He was blinded by a very bright light. The doe called out to his friend with great consternation. The Chinkin girl was also very frightened. Old Man Honi held his magic sword in his hands. He shouted fearfully that thunder rumbled. The glow in the sky grew brighter and more scorching. The old man shouted that a flying yaksha had been born. From above on the mountain, a huge flying demon appeared in bright pink flames. There was a huge monster with wings in the sky. Lightning flashed all around him. The frightened people realized that a flying yaksha had now appeared before them. Chinkin said fearfully, the demon headmaster had survived the thunderclap and moved to the next level. Hani said excitedly that he had never encountered anything like this before. He added that they were in for a life-and-death battle. The yaksha continued to soar through the sky and laugh evilly. He was full of strength. Sun swung his spear as well and shouted to the demon not to even think that he could dominate the world. Then the guy swung around and launched his weapon. He shouted that his spear called Despot was not weak at all. The protagonist jumped up and tried to attack the yaksha with a direct hit with his spear. The demon missed a very hard hit. The protagonist was able to hit it. After a mighty blow, the yaksha found himself trapped in a huge magical circle. The protagonist was startled to notice that the demon continued to live and fly after the blow. Sun realized that the yaksha was cheating, as such fast regeneration was impossible. Very quickly, the wound on the demon's body completely healed on its own. A flying yaksha named Xuan Kui asked angrily at the protagonist, did he really mean to injure him with his weapon? Suddenly the demon felt really bad. It was as if something was starting to happen in his body. The flying yaksha's body showed signs of green poisoning. He didn't understand what was happening to him. Sun shouted to the villain that today's topic of their lesson would be to answer the enemy in his own coin. The protagonist explained that the spear point was not a simple poison, but a toxin that had been infused for a very long time. Sun shouted angrily after the villain that there was a strong toxin in his body and he was trying to escape. After that, the protagonist pointed his finger at the departing yaksha and said that he was already dead. Suddenly his feathers started flying in all directions from the departing yaksha. Sun looked fearfully in front of him and realized that this was something he hadn't seen in zombie movies before. The protagonist began to spin his spear very quickly to fend off the attack of the sharp feathers flying at him. Sun shouted after the demon, telling him not to even dream of escaping. The yaksha continued to move farther away from the boy. Suddenly, the flying yaksha crashed into an invisible barrier at full speed. The demon flew off to the side. He didn't understand what had happened or what had prevented him from flying further. The top of the mountain was completely surrounded by the magic technique of the mountains. The old man sitting on the mountain held a sword in his hands. He said that it was the first time he was setting up such a barrier. Honi shouted to the protagonist that he must subdue the demon at all costs. At that time, Sun flew towards Yaksha with his spear. He prepared to attack. Sun swung his weapon and shouted to his opponent to taste his shadow spear technique. The yaksha retaliated against the protagonist with a technique called steel feathers. The demon shouted to his feathers to harden and fly at the protagonist. The flying yaksha launched a huge number of feathers in the direction of the protagonist. At that time, something suddenly attacked the flying yakshu from the side. He was frightened. A doe with a sword appeared, sitting atop an elephant dragon. He came to the aid of the protagonist. The yaksha was very frightened and worried. He realized that he was surrounded on all sides. The protagonist swung his spear. He shouted to his friend that they had a cohesive team. And then the guy swung his spear at the demon with all his might. The flying yaksha was very much startled. He flew from above and fell on top of the mountain. The granddaughter and grandfather were very frightened when they saw the explosion in front of them. A huge hole appeared on top of the mountain. At the bottom of it lay a demon, and the main character stood. Sun pierced the yaksha with his spear and said joyfully that he had defeated him. At that time, the main character's friends ran up. The doe yelled that his friend did great. Chinkin joyfully and excitedly thought that Sun was her hero. A doe was sitting on a mythical beast. He asked the girl why she was standing and advised her to hurry. The girl thought and replied to her interlocutor that she would cast a spell. The protagonist tells his girlfriend that the defeated demon won't even twitch now. Chinkin took out a piece of paper with a spell from her pocket. She said the magic words. After that, the girl placed the spell paper on the head of the defeated yakshi. The destroyed demon after the spell began to dissolve. A green glow appeared around it. Then a huge pillar of wind appeared next to the dead yaksha. Hani looked at the magic tornado and said his chin was making history. Near the foot of the Lunian mountain, the Zhao girl along with the soldiers were shooting zombies. The girl turned to the side and saw one zombie take a dump and start to sprawl. The commander shouted cheerfully to her soldiers as the zombies began to scatter. Zhao was very happy to say that the spearmaster had succeeded. The girl said to herself that she had not seen the protagonist at the moment of victory. The sky parted, and the sun began to shine. The whole place was illuminated with a bright light. The reborn demon Xuan Kong called the girl mistress and said he was waiting for her instructions. Qingqin told the former monster to admit the mistake and make amends in the future. The system told the vacationing protagonist that he didn't kill the zombie ringleader and handed him over to the Yang family. The system warned the protagonist that it might not give him the reward. Sun replied to his virtual assistant that sometimes it is better to give than to receive. The system turned around and flew off to the side. The guy said his electronic assistant had no anger. Afterward, the system said she asked the host not to be nice to other people. The protagonist suddenly noticed how everything around him began to change color. Sun looked around and marveled because of the system's ability to change appearance. Xuan Kuei called the girl mistress and said that he was waiting for her orders. Qingqian offered her rival to start by shaking hands. Xuan looked at his interlocutor with anger and hatred, his eyes burned with red fire. The girl rejoiced after the former demon extended her hand, while the protagonist stared in amazement at the new look of his system. System appeared before the master in the form of a beautiful girl with long white hair. System assistant asked the host why he was acting insensitive. Sun asked the interviewee why she was leaning close to him as if they were boyfriend and girlfriend. System in human form asked the interlocutor with interest, "Where does it say she's a girl?" The girl jumped on the guy's neck and asked, "Did she falsely accuse him?" Sun suggested that his virtual assistant talk at another time. The friends asked the protagonist in surprise, who was he talking to just now? Sun was very much frightened. He asked his companions, did they hear something? The system replied to the host that it had already returned to invisible mode. Someone asked Sun, did he decide to try wushu stances and breathing exercises? People gathered in the west of Hunan province in the courtyard of the Yan family residence. The residence were next to the house of the spearmaster. He resided in the Yang family residence. The people noticed their hero starting to approach from afar. They shouted with joy. Sun was on his way to visit the villagers on his motorcycle. He was happy to be welcomed. People looked at the motorcyclist and shouted that he was coming towards them. Sun was going full speed ahead. The guy rode up to the people on a motorcycle. There was a crowd around him. The protagonist was tired. He recalled the events of the past day and exhaled with difficulty. Sun was planning to go home yesterday, but old man Yan was very sneaky. He got the guy drunk. After that, the old man sent the protagonist to the Qingqian girl's room and locked the door. The main character was looking around. He hoped that nothing bad had happened last night. One of the people wanted to give the guy a present. The boy handed the protagonist a jar of viper tincture. Sun told the child that he wasn't the only one who had saved them all. People from all sides started carrying gifts to the protagonist. It was different things and products. After which, the protagonist loaded all the items he received into the back of a motorcycle and drove off. The system took on the appearance of a young girl again. She sat on the body and offered a cheerful image change to her host. Sun said grudgingly to his electronic assistant that she was messing with him, and she herself had no information on zombies. The girl waved her hands and said that the system could only rely on energy fluctuations. Sun said grudgingly he had a premonition that the culprit had escaped punishment. The girl Qingqian and Xuan were sitting on the roof of the house. They were looking down. The people below were seeing the protagonist off. The girl was very much upset. She didn't know when she might see Sun again. At this time, night had descended over the big city. The streets were full of people. The athlete handed out flyers advertising fitness and swimming services to passers-by. People most often refused. The guy looked unhappily at the fat man in front of him and thought he would drive himself into the grave with his lifestyle. The sportsman threw all his flyers down and began to stomp on them unhappily. He was unhappy that his business was going badly. The guy was walking down a deserted street. Suddenly he noticed a new hotel opened nearby. The athlete looked at the huge mirrored door with surprise. It seemed unusual to him. The guy looked at himself and said he had nice biceps and was full of strength. The athlete continued to pose. He told himself that his pecs were even better than a couple days ago. An unfamiliar red-haired girl suddenly appeared. She called the boy over to her. The stranger persistently suggested the athlete to go to karaoke and relax. The girl told the very romantic athlete that the women workers inside would love his muscles. The guy was very interested. He told the interlocutor that he agreed to go to karaoke with her. The athlete and his new acquaintance walked through the door of the establishment. The woman smiled very slyly at something. She was pleased that she had gotten a customer. A guy with a bunch of girls was sitting inside a karaoke machine singing a fun song. The athlete was very happy. He had a bunch of girls around him and drinks on the table. The girl looked defiantly at the client and asked, "Doesn't he want to rest?" The athlete was completely absorbed in the girl's appearance. He looked at her body. The stranger scrutinized the athlete. She didn't lose sight of him. The man didn't notice as spiders and large cocoons began to hang from the ceiling. The stupefied lad cheerfully offered the beauty another kiss. The client wanted more fun. At that time, pieces of spiderweb began to reach out to him from all sides. Very quickly, the guy started to get wrapped up in a thick web on all sides. The karaoke bar turned out to be an underground cave called the Bonds of Love. A giant spider trapped and restrained its victims. In charge of the cave was a huge spider. It was sitting on its big web. The Spider-Woman turned into a beautiful girl and slid down to her subordinates. The woman told her girls that they had done a very good job today, except for the zinnias. The Spider Lady told her terrified subordinate that she'd brought in a bad client. The girl decided to justify herself and said that she did not do it on purpose. In front of the woman lay an unconscious thin guy. The Spider-Woman said angrily that the guy looked like a delivery guy and couldn't possibly have life force in him. She could have gotten food poisoning like that. The red-haired girl said very pretty to her neighbor that she was no use to her. The Spider-Woman turned around and shouted to her subordinates to take care of the unlucky Zinnia. The girl was really scared. She yelled to her co-workers that she would try. The co-workers pounced on the girl and began enveloping her with cobwebs from all sides. The Spider-Woman sat on her big throne and laughed contentedly and joyfully. Cinny Girl was chained to the wall by a thick layer of web. She couldn't free herself. Morning came upon the town. The sun was shining brightly. Some guy was coming up the alley. The passerby looked wonderingly into the alley and decided that this was the right place for him. The guy was looking at a flyer for a fitness gym. He wanted to find it. The client thought he didn't want to be fat forever. He decided that from that day forward, he would take up weight loss. Suddenly, the guy noticed a beautiful girl appearing out of nowhere. A very amazed fatty walked over to Kinney and asked with interest if she was all right. There was a huge line outside the gym. All the people wanted to get in. In the inner room, the clients were working out. They were working hard and working out hard. A coach walked around the gym and motivated people in every possible way to do better. Customers were looking at a fat man who was shedding weight and running on the track. Next to him was a Cinny girlfriend. The guy was very happy. There was a girl next to him who didn't want to go shopping or for a walk. She spent a lot of time with him. The girlfriend helped the guy wipe off his sweat. Fatty thought joyfully to himself that his sincere heart would help everyone regain their thirst for life. The protagonist arrived at the National Intelligence Bureau building in an automobile. Sun read the note. He was called to the Intelligence Bureau and demanded that he arrive immediately. The guy thought to himself that the Jowling girl calls herself Boss Jow. She thinks she's a beautiful invader. The driver opened the door for the guy. He asked politely for him to get out. The main character was standing in front of the entrance to the building. There was a red carpet in front of him, and he thought it had finally happened. Sun told the system that Captain Chung had uncovered evil, and now she needed his help. The virtual assistant said there was a group of strange people nearby. Suddenly, the protagonist is hit from behind by a group of people dressed as Buddhist monks. The main character was very unhappy. He turned around and saw a bunch of strangers. The monks shouted that Master Longho, who is the master of the wind and clouds, was coming in front of them. They called their teacher a powerful magician and a descendant of a god. The apprentice angrily asked the protagonist, why did he directly look at his master? Sun told the monk to bugger off. The opponent was immediately restrained. The main character told the people around him to get out of the way. The monk came to his senses. He looked at the protagonist with great hatred and anger, at which time the master called out to his follower and told him to stop. The master told the protagonist that his name was Zhang Chai Lin, and he came from Longsho Mountain. The master told Sun Yu that he had injured his student. The main character was not happy. He told the teacher he couldn't hold the leash tighter. Sun told his interlocutor that he was annoyed when the master of the dog bites frantically. The master looked menacingly at his rival and told him to forgive him for the behavior of Zhang Qingling. The monks cheered their powerful master. They expected him to beat the protagonist. Near the entrance of the building, the officer greeted General Zhang and asked why he was here. The master looked very carefully at the high-ranking officer descending the stairs. The teacher walked over and greeted the Zhang general who approached him. The general was glad that he had met the master. The teacher joyfully informed him that Mount Logsho was completely subordinate to the nation. After which the man came over, extended his hand and greeted the protagonist. He said that the guy was very talented. The general extended his hand to the guy and said his name was Zhao Sanxing. He added that the guy could call him Old Zhao. The man escorted his guest inside the building and said they would talk inside. The protagonist was completely immersed in his thoughts. He realized that in front of him stood Zhao, who was the boss of Xin. Sun realized that man was the founding god of the nation that had been formed. The guy looked around and saw many people. He realized that the party was organized by Mr. Zhao Sasina. The protagonist thought that his information was blocked and only senior officers could see it. Sun realized that the old Zhao had invited him here for more than just a party. He asked his companion sitting next to him at the table, is he really asking him to join the Gnurbi? The protagonist replied to the man that he was very much accustomed to freedom. The general excitedly advised the guy not to just give up right away. He added that his interlocutor had great abilities. The protagonist told the man to give him time to think. He went into thought. The general was telling the guy that due to some internal problems, they were temporarily not funding something officially. At that time, a girl came running in. She greeted the grandfather at the table. Guesty was holding a glass of wine in my hands. She was very surprised to see the main character. Sun greeted the arriving girl. To himself, he thought to himself that Zhao Ling shouldn't know that his status had been revealed. The interlocutor ran up and justified herself to the protagonist. She said that her grandfather could read her diary without permission. The general was very surprised. He didn't understand what diary his granddaughter was talking about. At that time, the master and his students came in. He greeted the general and the girl. Sun noticed that the master had already changed his second costume. The master cheerfully told the grandfather that he wanted to ask his granddaughter to dance. Zhao Ling thanked the master for the invitation. The master thought that now he would definitely not be disturbed. The girl smiled, pointed her hand at the main character, and said she was already invited. The master was very unhappy because he was interrupted by Sun. He didn't believe that Zhao Ling would seriously go dancing with the main character. At which time one of the students said something very excitedly to the teacher. Suddenly, the foreman turned around and started to walk away. He shouted that he had business to attend to. There was music playing in the room and people were dancing. The main character was with his girlfriend. Zhao Ling extended her hand to the guy and said, "Master has only messed up everything." The main character wanted to say something to his dance partner. The system told the host that he couldn't dance and he wouldn't get off easy this time. Sun said grudgingly to his electronic assistant that she was not helping him, but only hindering him. Zhao Ling interrogated the protagonist with interest. What did he just say? The guy excused himself and said that he didn't say anything. Sun was very worried. The girl told him to come a little closer and the music should play now. The main character was shyly dancing with his girlfriend. He was trying hard. The system wrapped her arms around her master from behind and told him to follow her completely. Zhao Ling told the guy that she's very surprised because of the guy is a good dancer. The girl didn't see that the main character is helped by the system. Sun was dancing with his girlfriend. Thanks to the system's control, he could follow the rhythm. He did well. At the end of the dance, the guy was standing next to his partner. He realized that none of this was his idea. The guests were surprised. They didn't understand where the main character came from. Someone said that the stranger could even argue with Mr. Zhao. At that time, the main character's phone rang. He got very worried. The interlocutor very fearfully informed the protagonist that his help was very much needed. Of the main character's friend nicknamed Fatso called and asked for the hero Sunya's help. Sun fearfully and excitedly replied to his comrade that he would arrive soon. The protagonist looked around. He looked around and said to himself that he saw harmony all around him. After that, the main character saw his friend Fatty-chan and was very much surprised. The guy was wearing a tracksuit and holding a huge bouquet of flowers. Sun asked his friend with surprise, "What is he doing? And is he sick?" Fatty-chan looked at the protagonist and said to the one sad that he caught the virus. The guy was very thoughtful and excited. He even knocked over the table in front of him. The fat man excitedly shouted to his friend that he had contracted the love virus. Sun was very confused. Fatty-chan explained to him for a long time, and only then did the protagonist understand everything. While Sun was fighting with his friends against zombies, his friend met an angelic girl. Xiaoqi's girlfriend was not at all concerned about her friend's appearance. She was completely concerned about his health. The fat man told the protagonist that the girl never wanted to not go shopping. She spent all her time with him at the gym. Sun felt bored. The fat man said he wanted to confess to his girlfriend. He asked the main character for advice. The protagonist thought about it. Eventually, he told his friend that he would give him a couple of recommendations. Fatty-chan said excitedly to the protagonist that his girlfriend was coming. Sun looked closer and noticed a mysterious stranger walking down the street. Sun asked his friend if his girlfriend worked at the gym. The fat man replied that she might not work anywhere at all. The protagonist and his system had a lot on their minds. They realized that something was wrong here about the stranger. Sun told his friend that he should be able to pull a rose out of a bouquet without training. The protagonist ran with the flower to the side. He shouted to his comrade that his confession would wait. The fat man was very surprised and got excited. Sun watched the stranger carefully from around the corner. He was not comfortable following his best friend's lover. The protagonist watched Xiaoqi and definitely realized that there was obviously something wrong with this girl. She was walking in front. Sun decided to follow Xiaoqi. He thought it would be very good if the girl was all right. Suddenly, the protagonist ran into a red-haired stranger on the corner. The stranger hugged the guy and said he was very tough and she was really bruised. The seductress told Sunu that if he wanted to apologize, let him go with her and relax. The protagonist saw the girl Xiaoqi enter a suspicious door in the building. A stranger invited him there too. The main character got excited. He told his new acquaintance that he would go with her. Sun grabbed the red-headed girl and pulled her behind him. He yelled that she needed to rest immediately. The seductress thought the protagonist was healthy and her sisters would like him. The protagonist walked down the inner corridor of a club called the Bond of Love. The red-haired stranger led the protagonist to a separate room where there were already other girls. The sisters invited the guy to come in and have some fun. Sun realized that he was really in a brothel. The main character was worried. He couldn't believe that Fatty-chan's lover could also work in such a place. Sun stood up and said meaningfully that flirtatious girls were not his type. The protagonist sat confidently in his chair and said he wanted a cute blonde with short hair. The red-haired girl thought and realized that the customer wanted to see Xiaoqi. After that, the girl told her sisters to set things up right away. The girls hid behind a blanket. After a short pause, One of them called out to the protagonist. The workers dressed up as schoolgirls. One of them was persistently seducing Sunya. The workers expressed their discontent because the protagonist did not pay attention to them. At the same time, a sweet-smelling aroma spread from the machine throughout the hall. Sun began bit by bit to get drunk from the odor in the room. The girls continued to seduce him. At this time, monks ran into the establishment. They angrily demanded of the girls that they return their mentor. The red-haired girl told her sisters that she would be back soon and not to start without her. Afterward, all the monks were fired upon and disarmed by the web. The monks lay unconscious on the floor. The Spider-Woman sat on her throne. Her subordinates looked at them. The leader angrily told her subordinates to be quieter than water and lower than grass in this world. She added that she needed to think things over. The red-haired girl told her mistress that the sisters had received top-quality merchandise today. The girl came to the door. She told the leader that she was about to show her the boy out, at which time there was a very large explosion. The door splintered in all directions. A human silhouette appeared in the clouds of smoke and dust. Someone had obviously come to trash the place. A sinister laugh rang out. The female workers looked at the stranger who had come with great excitement. The red-haired girl grudgingly and angrily asked the stranger who he was, at which time a great number of Longzhou warriors came running through the door. Along with the warriors, their leader entered the room. The girl told the leader that the monks had decided to break in here. When the foreman came in, he took a look around and said that all this was out of the question. The teacher told the girls angrily and threateningly that they shouldn't have killed their brothers. One of the female workers told the foreman that she sucked his brothers who came to them. The foreman turned to his subordinates and decided to address their instructions. The teacher shouted to his battle monks not to retreat back a single step. At this time, the female leader suddenly kicked the master with her foot. A serious fight ensued. The Spider-Woman was beating their combat teacher as hard as she could. The Spider-Woman angrily shouted to her victim that she wouldn't be intimidated by scum like him. The master begged his rival to spare him. He said that the spider could eat his brothers. The mistress looked angrily at her victim and said that his brothers were delicious. The teacher was lying on the ground and couldn't move. He was pinned down by his rival's leg. Suddenly, the teacher turned around and attacked the mistress with a magical sand net. The leader didn't realize what had just been used against her. She saw golden stars flying around her. The master noticed how his rival was completely restrained by his magic spell. The sisters were very frightened. They called out to their mistress in a friendly, excited way. After that, the battlemaster told his subordinates that it was time for them to start filming. One of the monks was setting up his phone. The master told viewers on the broadcast that he was continuing his series of reports on demon taming. Mistress was bound by a spell. She tried to free herself, but it wouldn't work. The Spider-Woman shouted to her subordinates to help her immediately. The girls broke out of their seats and all ran to help Mistress. The protagonist at this time was in one of nature's rooms in the Bond of Love. Sun was lying surrounded by girls. He saw butterflies everywhere. He was babbling incoherently. One sister turned to her friend and asked, "Has she forgotten what their mistress is capable of?" The girl looked at the protagonist and suggested that her girlfriend steal this deliciousness. The protagonist lay there and saw various hallucinations in front of him. Sun saw his familiar fatty Chan run in. Chan took his frightened friend by the hand and told him to go quickly with him. Chan told the protagonist that he should not miss the big day. The protagonist saw him standing in front of the church entrance. From there, festive music could be heard. The guests inside the church welcomed Sunya. They all wished him happiness and health. The main character was very much taken aback. He didn't understand why people were congratulating him now. Afterward, the lad saw his fiancée in a white robe standing near the priest. The priest asked Sun Yichin, "Does he agree to marry 4 girls?" The protagonist, without even thinking, replied to the pastor that he totally agreed. Suddenly, the guy was surprised. He couldn't believe he was taking 4 girls as wives. Sun saw girls familiar from his life standing nearby. There was even a system among them. They greeted him. After that, the main character found himself in a room surrounded by pink mist. He didn't realize what was happening. The girls surrounded the guy and said they couldn't waste such a wonderful night. After that, all the girlfriends jumped up and started to run away. One of them shouted for Sun to catch up with them. The protagonist jumped up from his seat in an insane state and shouted that he would catch up with the girls. The girlfriends hid behind the red curtain. One of them yelled out that they were waiting for the guy. Sun opened the veil and saw that his friend Do was sitting behind him, and next to him a magical elephant dragon. The protagonist was very frightened. He realized that he was now seeing an obsession. Then the guy jumped up and jumped on the girls. He came to his senses. The sisters were very surprised that their client was able to break their spell by himself. The girls decided to run away. The protagonist angrily shouted to the fleeing sisters that they had dreamt him up and now wanted to run away. Sun quickly tied up the brothel workers. He decided to take care of the whole brothel himself. The protagonist stepped into the center hall of the establishment and was very much surprised. Sun saw before him a huge devastation in the building. The ceilings had been blown out and the bodies of the monks were lying on the sides. Afterward, the protagonist noticed as if something had fallen from above and clouds of dust had risen. Sun saw Master Zhang's body lying on the floor. He couldn't understand how the master had gotten here. The main character had a strange feeling. He didn't realize what place he was in. The Spider Girl shouted to her colleague Xiaoqi that she had done a good job. The Spider Girls wanted to finish Master Zhang. Sun was very amazed looking at the girls. The protagonist was surprised to see Xiaoqi in the body of a spider. She wanted to finish off the teacher who was lying down. Sun looked at Xiaoqi with surprise. He couldn't believe that the girl had become a spider. With that, the protagonist snatched up his spear and lunged against the witches in front of him. At this time, someone appeared in the door. The guy excitedly and loudly shouted to the girls to stop. Fatty Chan ran into the room and demanded that the spider girls stop. The protagonist was surprised to see his friend. He also noticed that the Xiaoqi girl had also stopped. The girl looked at her friend very carefully. She was very surprised. The fat man was holding a dumbbell. He told his girlfriend that she was only acting pretentious towards him because she was forced by the witches. Chan shouted to the girl that he could protect her. Xiaoqi asked her friend in surprise, "What is he telling her?" The girl held the unconscious master's head in her hands. She told the fat man that he was just food to her. Chan was very surprised to hear such words. He couldn't believe that he was just food to his girlfriend. Xiaoqi told her interlocutor that all people look the same to her, but the sight of human beings makes her salivate. The girl asked the guy, "Couldn't a person love a steak or a salad?" Chan became very upset after hearing such words from his girlfriend. Xiaoqi said angrily that she was in for a very hearty dinner tonight. She added that her friend was a very plump and obedient delicacy. The girl told the fat man that she even made him lose weight, so the sissies wouldn't choke on his fat. The spider women laughed very wickedly. They couldn't believe that Fatty Chan was so badly blinded by passion. The protagonist became very angry. He grabbed his spear and prepared to attack his rivals. Sun jumped up and flew upwards. He decided to immediately avenge his friend, the fat man. The spider woman angrily shouted that they were being attacked by yet another cocky human. She commanded her friends to kill the protagonist. The rivals started throwing pieces of spiderweb at Sunya to hit him. The guy flew with his spear towards the opponents. He decided to finish off Xiaoqi first. The protagonist was preparing to strike the girl with a spear. He shouted that the witches dared to play with his friend's feelings. Suddenly, the guy felt like he couldn't act with his spear. It felt like it was stuck. Sun turned around and noticed that his weapon was tightly wrapped in white cobwebs. The red-haired spider shouted at the guy that he was still a lowly human. Now Sunu would have to fight without his weapons. The protagonist hung on his spear. He swung and prepared to strike the girl. Xiaoqi was really scared. She realized that the guy would be able to attack her without a weapon. Sun kicked his opponent's leg with a swing. He shouted that it would be even more interesting without weapons. From the powerful blow, the girl flew aside. The protagonist looked at the lying master. Sun looked at the rest of his rivals and shouted for them to come down. The mistress was frightened. She realized the protagonist might have more weapons. The guy immediately activated an anti-spider magic spell. That's when the main character's spear spun. It started spinning the building around. The spiders were spinning in space along with the whirlwinds from the spear. Mistress shouted to the girls to grab onto something. The main character was in the center and the spiders were spinning in all directions. The fat man was very proud of his friend. Chan shouted encouragingly to his friend to give the spiders some heat. The protagonist looked at his friend and supported him back with a gesture. Sun jumped up. He shouted to Fatty Chan that he would avenge him now. The protagonist prepared to leap from above to finish the spider with a powerful blow. Sun swung his arm as well, to finish off his mistress with a powerful blow. The guy smacked the spider's head with the palm of his hand. It started to go down. From a mighty blow, the mistress fell down and everything began to collapse around her. The protagonist was very surprised at the scale of the destruction that had just occurred. Sun couldn't believe that he could destroy everything like that with just a palm strike. There were dead bodies and ruins all around. The protagonist told himself that he had seriously increased his power level after dealing with the dead. There were people around. They examined the ruins and said that the main character was to blame for everything. People would point at the guy and say he was the one who beat up the girl. Sun shouted that all his victims were monsters that devoured people. He added that his words would be confirmed by his friend Fatty Chan. The protagonist turned around and saw that his comrade was sitting beside the body of his girlfriend Xiaoqi. The fat man turned around and asked unhappily to Sunya why cruelly killed his bride. Chan was very angry. He grabbed a knife and lunged at the protagonist. The protagonist activated a magic skill. Blue flames appeared in his hand. After that, Sun struck the chest of the Fatty Chan, running at him with his palm. The fat man flew aside. He asked, surprised, had Sun raised his hand against his friend? The protagonist looked angrily at Chan and said sternly that he was no longer his friend. The fat man was left lying alone on the ground surrounded by human bodies and ruins. After that, the protagonist went to the body of the lying spider. He examined it carefully. Madam said in a deathly surprised voice that the guy had the impossible technique. Sun looked over and saw that the spider in front of him possessed only a low D rank. A system had emerged. She said that lower-ranked beings were somehow able to master advanced technology. Sun was not pleased with the appearance of the assistant. System told the owner that he did well, and she wanted to give him a round robin. The electronic assistant gave the owner a top-quality anti-pouch broom. It was yellow and very fluffy. Sun scrutinized the gift. He said that it was indeed not a simple broom. The guy didn't understand how he was supposed to use the broom. At this time, a spider came up behind him. Suddenly, someone knocked the spider's head hard and it dropped dead. The protagonist turned around and saw his friend Fatty Chan with dumbbells in his hands. The fat man hugged the protagonist and told him that he would never trust girls again. The system told the protagonist that a couple of arachnids had escaped. The protagonist grabbed his broom and shouted to his friend that he'd be right back. The protagonist accelerated and with a mighty leap jumped from the basement through the breaches into the street. Sun found himself in the evening city. He had to catch up with the remaining spiders. The girl asked excitedly to her friend, "Are there really no more sisters left?" The red-haired spider replied fearfully. She didn't want to die at the hands of the protagonist. One of the girls turned around and shouted fearfully as the main character caught up with them. The spiders started shooting their webs at the guy to stop him. Sun Mahal deftly with his broom and repelled all attacks with his web at him. The guy found a button on the broom handle to push during the chase. He activated it. Then the yellow broomstick came to life and turned into a dangerous monster. The girl was really scared. She didn't realize what was coming at her. After that, the revitalized broomstick caught up with all the spiders and pinned them to herself. The protagonist looked happily at the handle of the instrument and decided to press the button again. After another press of the button, the broomstick returned back to its original size very quickly. Sun said that it was all very convenient. The protagonist looked over and noticed that all the spiders appeared to be glued to his broomstick. The protagonist tied up all the captive spiders. They were sitting on Earth. Sun decided to start by wiping his spear. The boy looked at his captives. He didn't feel like killing them in front of the fat vat. The system showed him that the arachnids were H-ranked. Suddenly a friend came up behind the protagonist and put his hand on his shoulder. Chan said sorrowfully to the protagonist to finish the captives. He said that his heart was forever broken. After that, the protagonist activated his magic. His hand glowed pink. At which time the master rose up. He shouted to the protagonist to wait. The teacher took out a spell paper and said that he didn't need any help from outsiders in dealing with uncleanness. After that, the master went to the protagonist and said he would do it himself. The camera was under the ruins. It kept broadcasting. The fat man told his friend that it was unfair to give all the laurels to the teacher. The camera showed on the video broadcast how the master destroyed the captives. The viewers wrote enthusiastic comments. Sun told the distressed friend not to be upset. The fat man replied that he would not love anyone else, while the master was using magic to siphon all the energy out of the arachnids. It was a good catch for him. After the energy was drained, all the spiders turned into harmless insects. The master decided to himself that he would become the people's idol and bathe in the rays of glory. Suddenly, the teacher noticed a huge crowd of people running towards him from the side. The master was beaten, but also very happy. He thought his fans were running. Joyful people and reporters ran and demanded that the hero sign his autograph and cooperate with them. Reporters were yelling and demanding the guy to give them an autograph. Some reporter wanted an interview. A huge crowd ran through the master and didn't even notice him. He was left lying on the earth. The teacher was very upset. He shouted after the fleeing people that they had eyes, but were blind. People ran after the protagonist. Someone shouted that he had a good offer for the guy. Sun was running away and carrying his friend in an armful. Chan didn't understand why his comrade was running away. The protagonist jumped up. He told his friend that he wasn't running away at all. Sung put his hand on his head. He said what he was thinking. This posture suits him best. Journalists and reporters were happily taking pictures of the protagonist. People stood on the ground and cheered the Sunya, who was on the roof of the house. Information about the protagonist was in many media. Many people read. The teacher told the students that they should study, not chase celebrities. The teacher took the students' pictures from them and told them to go back to class. A colleague told her teacher Lee not to get angry and to be careful with her wrinkles. The teacher excitedly said that she should take good care of herself before she met her fiancé. A teacher showed her colleague a picture of the main character and said that he was her soulmate. The student was surprised to see the picture and noticed that it was her boyfriend. A student ran up. He shouted to Zhang and Lee's teachers that the air conditioner outside had gone crazy. The teachers didn't believe it. The surprised and frightened boy told the teachers to see for themselves. The school air conditioner came to life and was running away at full speed. Teacher Zhang even pinched herself in surprise to make sure she was awake. The next day, the main character was walking around Yangzhou City. He went to a newsstand. There were many people around. Sun wore a mask so no one would recognize him. He was accompanied everywhere by the system. The system looked in the newspaper and saw a picture of the main character. She asked, "Do reporters really use a model camera?" The main character looked happily at his picture in the paper and thought he came out well. Sun was pleased because of his appearance on the front page of the newspaper. He decided to take one copy for himself. The protagonist put his hand on the paper. Someone came up next to him and put his hand on the paper too. Sun looked to the side and saw someone with long, silky hair walk up. The guy looked to the side and saw an old man with long hair and carrying a bottle, which he set down on a newspaper. Sun asked the stranger with interest why the stranger was clinging to this newspaper so much. The old man grabbed the newspaper and asked the protagonist to give it to him. The salesman was surprised because the customers tore up one newspaper. He suggested they have an auction. The stranger quickly grabbed the newspaper and tore one part out of it for himself. Then the old man grabbed a piece of newspaper and quickly started running away with it. Sun said with astonishment, did the old man take only half of the paper for himself? He realized that he must be a fan of the Spearmaster. The system scrutinized the paper. She said judiciously that fans don't need half a face. The salesman was very much startled and frightened. He had not seen the system, and so for him the newspaper itself was floating in the air. The protagonist decisively realized that there was clearly something wrong with the situation. Sun ran at full speed after the stranger. He decided to find out what was going on. The guy was running at top speed. He was determined not to lose sight of the old man. Sun stopped at a deserted place. The old man gradually walked forward. The guy realized what the place was. The system asked the host, what did he find out? Sun told the assistant to read vertically on the second page the article in the lower right corner. The virtual assistant read that the page reported an evening meeting with God. She asked the guy if this was some kind of code. Sun told the interviewee that the newspaper had written about a secret meeting of sect members. He added that the meeting was illegal and there must be many believers in the religion. He saw an old man go through a gate into an abandoned place. The protagonist followed the stranger in. He noticed some things lying on the floor. Sun looked around. There was a pile of junk everywhere. He thought the old man had vanished. The main character saw a brand new washing machine. He didn't understand why it might have been thrown away. Sun looked at the shiny surface of the washing machine with great surprise. It began to come to life. The terrified guy noticed the washing machine come fully to life and start turning into something. The machine became huge and human-like. It had arms. The machine that came to life told the man that it was a drum washing machine called a bumblewash. Sun looked at the metal monster and decided that the name Bumblewash suited him very well. The guy thought with interest as to what the machine would do next. The machine blurted out an incoherent sentence and said that the king is a hidden tiger. Sun didn't think long and replied to the metal monster about the pagoda cities and the river monster. The guy held up a newspaper to the car and said he was here to meet God. The machine looked carefully in the newspaper on the page for the right column. The metal monster told the protagonist confidently that he would show him the way. After that, the surprised protagonist noticed the washing machine starting to take on its usual appearance. The washing machine's door opened and she invited the protagonist to come in. The guy paused in indecision. He realized he had no way out. Sun then jumped into the open car door in full confidence. Sun ducked inside through the open hatch of the washing machine. He had a long way to go in the distance. The guy was advancing down a long, tangled, and very winding pipe. Sun found himself in an obscure basement. He thought the whole situation was very strange. He thought that the washing machine was some kind of transformer. The guy couldn't figure out if machines could believe in God. He told himself he was in trouble again. He didn't want to destroy the cult. The system advised the guy to go and see. She added that she would help him. Sun looked to the side and saw a water machine chugging beside him. Sun looked at the water machine. He decided that this machine looked familiar to him from behind. He began to suspect something. The guy realized that the water car looked completely like the girl he knew. Sun shouted to the machine to wait. The machine turned around and the guy saw that his familiar Zhao was inside. The girl was very insistent that the protagonist keep quiet and that no one would reveal them. Zhao Ling told the protagonist that people were gathering at the underground temple because of a newspaper article about a Tibetan poem. The guests of the meeting decided that they could combine the human soul with household appliances to achieve immortality. Zhao Ling came to the meeting to conduct an undercover investigation undercover. Sun asked his girlfriend, "Is there a machine-human hybrid standing at the entrance?" The girl replied that the guests of the meeting believe that God can digitize the human soul by making a robot out of it. Zhao showed the guy a video on her phone. She said that God can control technology and arrived to a human world last month. The girl said she drew a comic strip to illustrate it. The picture showed a woman sitting on a couch with a cat sleeping next to her. After that, the woman's phone rang. It disturbed her calm. The woman looked at her phone. She couldn't refuse and immediately went downstairs. As the woman was walking back, a huge shadow looked at her and said that the Earthlings would be grateful because their god had returned. The shadow promised to be a savior. The landlady got angry. She yelled angrily that her cat Milky had turned out the lights again. The woman turned on the light and afterwards she discovered that she had made a mistake. The robot vacuum cleaner came to life. It was a terrible shadow coming from it. The machine shouted to the woman not to ignore God, or else she would be punished. After that, all the appliances in the room went crazy. They came to life. And then the cat ran up and swung the vacuum cleaner down with its paw. The vacuum cleaner was surprised. He thought he had made a mistake. He could not believe that cats were the masters of the earth. The robot vacuum cleaner jumped out the window. He said that very quickly he would control the world. A woman was really freaked out because her robot vacuum cleaner had escaped. After that unusual evening, the girl could only take cold food to go. The broadcast on the phone ended. Zhao told her companion that the general situation looked like this. The protagonist looked very hard and unhappily at the phone. He didn't understand much. The girlfriend asked the guy very excitedly how did him like it. The guy didn't really understand exactly what kind of answer his girlfriend wanted from him. Sun replied judiciously to the girl that everything was beautiful and good for him. He thought to himself that the girl's comic strip had a lot of topics that were irrelevant. At which time the drum machine clapped its metallic hands, calling for attention. Metal Monster said he was the master of ceremonies. There were many guests sitting in chairs all around the hall. They were different machines and mechanisms. A drum machine declared the ceremony of the divine decree open. There was something on the stage under the tablecloth. The guests in the audience and the car started chanting loudly that God is coming. Mechanisms and the people chanted for God to bless the mechanical renewal. The main character was very surprised. He looked at the stage and he couldn't believe there was a car god. In anticipation of the huge blessing, the huge crowd shouts jubilantly as they await the ceremony. The robot host removes a red silky cloth from a huge television set with one swipe, shouting praise to God. Chung looks at the monitor and thinks that maybe everything happening in the hall will be shown on a live broadcast. Guy ponders the possible identity of their god as the crowd still cheered the blessing. The TV screen shows a presentation of two boys with wings holding a chair with an unknown creator god on it. The crowd makes even more noise from this. The dark figure in the chair turns in profile with flashing red eyes. Chung only remarked at the crowd's cheers that the creator god must be his name. He thought this choice was too loud but appropriate. The robot host raised his hands in the air and began his speech about how they were all gathered here just to see the great blessing. Eve, the announcer, announced the election, pointing to the monitor and asking everyone to choose candidates for the God-given rebirth. The crowd cheered. Chung wasn't exactly in the know, but from Zhao Ling's words, he only realized that the God-given rebirth was the introduction of a human soul into a robot. He wasn't sure if it was a good idea. Zhao Ling jumped up from her seat and started shouting for her to be chosen, thus blending in with the crowd. She frightened Chung with this action. Before the guy could think of anything, the girl explained that this was the best time to investigate. Chung didn't quite understand the selection system, so he asked Lin about it. The TV monitor instantly opened up and became twice, if not 3 times larger. The boy remarked that this was truly worthy of the creator. The robot host, almost immediately, as if at Chung's beck and call, began to explain the selection system. Only those with at least 2 A-rank results will pass. The 2 guys in the crowd exhaled a sigh of relief, for nothing could be easier than 2 A ranks. Zhao Ling hurried Chung. After all, they were also about to become rebirth candidates. The first batch was asked by the robot host to stand in front of the monitors to pass the first level. The robot announced that when abilities were detected, the rating would be displayed automatically. One of the guys in the first batch was looking at the monitor with hope at the strength found in him. Finding absolutely nothing, a hand sprang out of the screen, slapping the man on the cheek and calling him a loser. This was followed by another blow, but this time with a slate on the other cheek. The injured guy flew back and whispered quietly that the culling was still very harsh. At the same time, another hand popped out of the monitor, hitting the guy who was previously standing next to him. Chung was startled, also thinking that the culling was cruel. A red light flashed, notifying the candidate that they had failed the first level. Before the hand from the monitor hit Zhao Ling, the girl reacted faster, hitting the red light bulb hard. Chung looked at the girl, ending his thought with the verdict that some people could be much rougher. Lin was angry at her reflexes, which were out of control. She wasn't going to punch the screen. The little robots immediately reacted to this. They rode up to the girl, picking her up. Zhao Ling tried to break free, screaming that she had done it unintentionally. Cheng noticed how fake her attempts to resist looked. Before Lin was led away, she threw some sort of thing at the guy. He caught it immediately, a little taken aback. That thing turned out to be a walkie-talkie in the shape of a small card, with a silhouette of a girl drawn on one side. Chung finally advanced with the next batch, and the screen showed that the guy had top-ranked strength. A clapper slammed above the young man, from which multicolored confetti sprinkled. The creator god hummed interestedly, turning toward the boy and flashing his red eyes. The host robot, who had some kind of severed wire on his shoulder, congratulated Chung for discovering such a powerful force. The presenter notified the guy that there was one last test left called electrical resistance. The robot pointed at Chung with the severed wire that had recently been resting on his shoulder. The young man was frightened, for he was totally unprepared for this. An explosion followed, destroying part of the dump under which the hall was located. After a while, the guy, clutching his head, opened his eyes, amazed that he had managed to survive at all. He realized he was in the container of the truck. Which made him uneasy, because at the moment of the explosion, they had all been in the secret room under the huge dump. From the side of Chung, Xiaotong suddenly appeared, illuminating her face with a flashlight and supposedly pretending to be a ghost. Chung, startled, recoiled from the girl and shrieked, saying that there was no need to pretend to be a ghost and try to intimidate him. Her master, for a moment, was almost electrocuted recently. Ignoring Chung's words, Xiao Tian said that the creator god's energy seemed familiar to her. The guy didn't quite understand what it could mean. The truck stopped, and Chung, sensing this, tensed slightly in anticipation. Unfamiliar voices were heard from behind the opening door. They were saying something about a high-level candidate. After the back of the truck was opened, Chung saw the silhouettes of the robots. Their faces couldn't be seen because of the illumination. The guy covered his face with his hand and squinted his eyes. The light was too strong. The unknown men, who turned out to be two robots, noticed that Chung had awakened. Both droids marveled at how he had woken up so quickly. One of them thought that because of that, the guy might reveal the location of the base. The second robot, Steamroller, immediately cut off this thought with the fact that Chung couldn't be that strong. The first robot, resembling an Akita Inu dog, wanted to answer, but the droid paratrooper interrupted him, for he had noticed the boy's disappearance. The robot dog also came to be perplexed. He also honors God the Creator, then why does he bring problems? Chung jumped on the robots from the ceiling and pinned them to the floor. The robots were frightened and started shouting, "What is this guy doing?" The location of the secret base was in an abandoned house on the outskirts. As soon as the droids saw Chung's face, they immediately recognized him as Spearmaster. The young man did not react in any way to the recognition. He opened the inner compartment of the robot dog's belly and repeated his question about what their creator was even doing. The robot got angry and started shouting that Chung dare not slander their creator because he was the hope of human evolution. But the guy didn't believe this nonsense and asked, "Then why are they hiding?" The robot dog easily reasoned that the ideas of genius would always be opposed by ordinary people. Chung tapped his spear on the floor. He wasn't satisfied with the droid's answer because it was all just pretty words, and he can't know how many people they had electrocuted. Chung stood up and leaned on his spear and looked at the robot steamer who was lying with a broken neck. The guy said that their creator god was the killer and they were just accomplices. Chung pulled the wires out of the droid's compartment and pulled on them threateningly, saying they could all go to hell with their ideals. The robot dog freaked out and shrieked, saying he would tell the guy anything he asked. 20 minutes later, Chung, changing into the robot dog suit, found out that they didn't know about the creator's true plans. The guy decided it would be best to meet him in person. For that reason, he changed into a droid. The guy headed towards the main abandoned building, which was most likely where their base was. On the grounds, someone was cleaning up a large number of bodies. The overall situation was clear to Chung. The creator god had appeared no earlier than half a year ago, with the motive of bringing the backward life of the land to renewal. The boy remembered Zhao Ling's comic books. She portrayed the creator god as a huge and powerful being. Mechanical renewal has attracted large numbers of believers who dream of eternal life. In the comic, Zhao Lin wrote that the creator god not only transferred their soul into the robot, but also gave them the ability to transform. Chung walked down the neon-lit corridor. Apparently, the Traverser really wants to transform people's lives on Earth? The young man asked Xiaotong's opinion. The girl coming out of his ear shouted that he must have bad intentions. Chung felt awkward and asked what she was doing in his ear. She in turn grabbed her head and said that the closer they got to the right place, the more her head hurt from the hesitation. Then she ducked back into her ear with words about wanting to be quiet. As he passed another guard, he noticed that there were many times more guards. That means he's already near the right place. Chung stood in front of the indicator and waited for it to recognize him. After recognizing it, he took a quick step inside. As soon as the doors closed behind him, the young man took off his mask and exhaled in relief. He had not been recognized. Chang opened his eyes and flinched. Just a glance was enough for him. The room he found himself in was a factory for converting people into energy. Looking around, the boy resolutely told himself that he owed it to himself to stop this outrage. Before he could act, however, he was interrupted by an unknown man. He was high above the ceiling, and as if sarcastically, he greeted the boy, saying, "What a special guest." Chung looked up and almost immediately realized who was in front of him. The so-called god descended lower, so that he and Sun Chung were almost on par. The guy was filled with anger and shouted that he had no right to call himself a creator. A spear appeared in his hands. Chung chopped his suit into small pieces. The boy shouted, ordering the creator to stop all of this immediately. The one only reacted with a chuckle and looked down at Sung Chung and asked why he should stop. After all, people were asking him to be reborn themselves. The creator defiantly lifted some man from the pile and microwaved the microwave, telling Chung to watch if he didn't believe him. Then he sharply connected the man and the electrical device. There was an explosion. The reborn thanked his creator joyfully. But when the smoke cleared, he realized that there seemed to be something wrong with him. His arm was sticking out of his head and his shin was unnaturally low. The creator only laughed, saying that apparently luck wasn't playing for his team today. After these words, he threw the reborn to another pile of bodies, informing him that he may not be upset, for he could contribute to the next upgrades by becoming energy. The reborn fell into the incomprehensible liquid, gurgling loudly. After that, the battery was fully charged. Energy began to flow through the wires, rising higher and higher to the endpoint. The creator laughed, relieved that the charging was finally complete. That one flew upward and energy began to fill it. Afterward, the creature began to talk about how as soon as it came to this world, it parasitized a small robot due to lack of power. The creature announced that he would like to show one thing. After creating an illusion, the creator showed a huge rocket. He said that as soon as it took off, all his energy would encompass the mainland through the satellite, and when it did, hundreds of millions of people would be reborn. Song Chung shuddered. It looked like this was his main target. The guy abruptly snapped out of his seat and shouted that he was about to show how villains die in their world. Now he needed to show him why villains who talk a lot don't live long. The pseudo-god eyed. He thought the old ghost's breathing grew stronger, but quickly dismissed it, for he was only human. The one waved his hand and raised the iron pipes, pointing them directly at Sung Chung. The guy fended off the blows with a big swing of his spear. The pseudo-god smirked nastily, saying that Chung was already too late. Sung Chung swung and struck straight at his stomach, but the spear went straight through without hitting the undercreature in any way. The boy turned around and saw the alien behind him. He thought that fate was mocking him, because this creature was immaterial. The pseudo-creator grinned and began to gather energy in his hand. The one replied that a carbon-based existence was too backward. He then sent this energy aside, saying that the new age would soon come. Sung Chung looked at the pulsing button in the wall. He had already imagined how, at her touch, a rocket would take off and the world would turn into utter chaos. The guy's face contorted in a grimace of horror. He began to quickly go through all possible variants of events and come up with a plan. Song Chung thrust his hand forward, summoning the elephant dragon and the guy called Lan Ling to his aid. Lin appeared at once, along with his dragon. She smiled evilly and said it was time for a warm-up since he hadn't been outside in a while. On his dragon, he flew upwards, straight towards the fiery creature. Sung Chung reached into the inside pocket of his jacket and said with a relieved smile that a hero should be ready for anything. He took out the very card Zhao Ling had given him. The guy thought that, fortunately, he would always have allies. Black smoke was seeping from behind the closed office doors. The two guards were shocked. One of them wondered what was going on in there. The second guard looked tensely at the doors, but said he didn't know and wouldn't want to know. Outside the doors was Master Zhang and Zhao Ling. The latter brewed himself some coffee, and said that even if their information wasn't enough, Song Chung would definitely handle it. Lin was lying on the sofa, completely unresponsive to the man's words. She only let out a sad sniffle. The girl sniffed once more and shrieked, saying how stupid she was. In her hands was the same walkie-talkie as Chung's. Zhang felt sorry for her, for she had lost face right in front of her lover. The walkie-talkie in the girl's hand suddenly vibrated. Sung Chung called out to Lin. She jumped up, raising her hands with the radio up and shouting joyfully that the guy was alive and he must be okay. Sun Chung's voice came out of the radio again, telling them to stop the launch of the booster rocket. The man jumped up asking what the missile was. But the last thing the guy said was that they should try to stop it blindly. After saying those words, the walkie-talkie in Zhao Ling's hands began to break down. The girl wanted to rush to Chung's aid, but she was stopped by Master Zhang. He said that they should do business now. The walkie-talkie in Sung Chung's hand broke. He knew that there would be no reinforcements, and he and Lan Lin would have to search for the fire creature's weak spot by themselves. The pseudo-god said insulted, how insolent they were, ringing in front of God's nose. As the villain spoke, Sung Chung watched his body. He was trying to find a vulnerable spot, and there it was, the light veins converging in one place. The guy had clutched the broken radio in his hands, and was now about to show the pseudo-god how to use idioms properly. Cheng jumped. shouting that the Undercreator was not at all modest and unassertive, that one was terrible, very insolent and malicious. The guy moved closer to the Undergod, telling the creature that he shouldn't have messed with the Earthlings. The Fire God looked at Chung skeptically, and the latter in turn put all his strength into the strike and aimed the spear exactly at the part where the white veins were crawling. The tip of the spear stabbed into the creature, and later, Sung Chung flew off. The strong sound wave flung away not only the guy but also Lan Ling, and it was as if a protective dome had formed around the Fire God. Cheng ordered Lan Lin to attack the creature in the chest, for by all appearances that's where its weak point was. The pseudo-god waved his hand and all the electric devices went up. The one grinned and asked if they really thought the one would fight them unarmed. The fiery creature began to manipulate the items. The one shouted good luck wishes in a sarcastic tone. A robot hybrid that had his face approached Sung Chung. The boy was frightened. Later, swinging his spear, he told Lin to stand back. Putting great force into the spear, he threw it. The blow hit right on target, and the Undercreator was thrown backwards by the shockwave. The boy brushed the droplets of sweat off his forehead. It would all be over soon. Chung turned around, but for some reason he didn't notice Lan Lin beside him. The fiery alien smiled evilly and said that apparently they were alone. But at the same moment, Lin appeared beside it and punched it exactly in the stomach, thus causing the creature to shriek. Lan Lin smiled smugly. He knows a few idioms too, such as taking the enemy by surprise and attacking. Sung Chung looked at the boy enthusiastically. Lin is definitely worthy of being marketed as a celebrity. The pseudo-god began to lurch in pain, the clot in his chest beginning to rupture. The boys could barely stay on their feet, covering their faces. Chung was shocked at the power that emanated from the creature. But suddenly, darkness enveloped everything. Something was happening that Sung Chung couldn't explain. But suddenly he felt something enter his head. The boy was terrified. He fell to the ground, finding himself in some obscure place. A huge shadow with blue eyes leaned in front of Chung. He realized that he was in the netherworld and seemed to be dead. A huge shadow with blue eyes leaned in front of Chung. He realized that he was in the netherworld. The boy looked at his hands. They were transparent. It seemed that only his consciousness had entered this world. Chung looked around. There were cracks and emptiness all around. This world was dying. The purple creature laughed. It asked him if he wanted to fight him after he had sucked all the energy from the ringing star world. Just then, a second creature appeared behind the guy. It was the Undercreator. He said that the whole world was suffering because of the purple creature, and the one still dreaming of escaping. The boy looked at the Undercreature. He realized he was seeing his memories. But why? And who was this purple creature? The purple alien replied that cannibalism and survival of the fittest was the spirit of his clan. Afterward, he clenched his fists and asked what good was the false sense of justice of the Undercreator anyway. If he wanted to, let him stop it. The non-creator roared. The one really wants to destroy the entire star domain? The purple alien laughed and attacked the Undergod with pointed stones. He roared in pain and returned the attack. Song Chung immediately screamed. He was hit in the head. The not god looked at Chung. He finally verified that it was the old ghost that he hadn't seen for over 1,000 years. He took a swing. Luck was on his side today, after all. The fire alien was ready to kill Song Chung, but it was prevented by Lan Ling. The one asked, since it's not all over yet, what is Chung thinking about now? The boy wondered, what is the point of this story? After all, the alien in front of them is a real threat. Sung Chung materialized a spear in his hand. He jumped towards the Undercreature. They must destroy it as quickly as possible. The boy rushed toward the alien, trying to put maximum force into his spear. The spear flew through the pseudo-god. He wondered if the guy could use the power of the black crystal. The alien needs to finish its preparations immediately by injecting energy into the satellite. As soon as he reached the button, he cried out in horror. The button was completely ruined. Now the satellite was impossible to launch. Lan Lin and his dragon smiled caustically, chuckling at the alien. Song Chung looked at the Undercreature and suggested that he break up without a fight. The one looked at the guy skeptically. It was an unexpected offer. The fiery alien, without further ado, abruptly traveled to the energy pool whose battery was full. Sweat broke out on the boys' foreheads. They were both thinking, what the hell is going on right now? A huge jet of energy surged upward from the abandoned building and hit several reborn nearby and began sucking out their energy. Most of the robots lay motionless in the streets, stripped of all power. The boys guessed what purpose the fiery alien had in mind. The liquid from the pool began to overflow over the edges. Something very huge was coming out of there. Song Chung cried out, a look of horror on his face. He didn't believe that such a thing was possible. A huge robot emerged from the pool, with a pseudo-god sitting at the control panel. That one pointed his cannon directly at Lan Lin and the elephant dragon. The cannon fired a huge stream of energy and blew a hole in the wall and a few more, knocking those two back. Sung Chung abruptly turned around and was about to attack the fire alien. The one pointed the gun at him now. The alien said the guy wouldn't be able to use the black crystal's full power. This time he had won against the black crystal old ghost. After saying those words, the pseudo-god shot out. The robot walked over to the wall with the button. Thoth said gloatingly, "Did they really think he couldn't do anything about the melted button?" The fire alien activated the power. It glowed red. Pseudo-god thought that eventually the world would be in his hands. Suddenly, someone chuckled at his thoughts. The fiery alien cried out, "What was that? Who was that?" Just then, someone flew out of the robot, shattering a huge red indicator. That person turned out to be Chung. He climbed up, shouting that the good people had run out. Flying upward, the old ghost greeted his friend. The Falfy creator was surprised. Chung couldn't stay alive, then how? The ghost smiled and said that one was still as stupid as he had been 1,000 years ago. Suddenly, an explosion occurred in the control cabin, severely damaging the robot. The old ghost clenched his hand into a fist. He had been right to choose Sun Chung's body. The fire alien raised its voice again, asking the black crystal ghost if it had really taken over this body. A purple cloud formed behind the guy, creating the same silhouette, only several times larger. He replied that everything belonged to him anyway, and the undergod would always be defeated. The black crystal ghost raised his hands and loomed over Lao Zun. He asked why he kept fighting if he wanted to talk to his brother. Tearing apart the wall of the abandoned building, the old ghost pulled the source of life from his brother. He squeezed it between his fingers and said he seemed to have let him have too much before. The black crystal ghost squeezed the source and it burst. The pseudo-god was defeated. The old ghost looked around at the abandoned building. It would be sad if his brother's efforts went to waste. A hand emerged from the rubble. It was Lan Lin. That one concluded that since they hadn't been sent to the Tower of Heroes, that meant Song Chung was still alive. Lan looked at the huge silhouette with Chung in the middle of it. The latter didn't understand what had happened to the guy. The old ghost, meanwhile, was examining his brother's work. He was not surprised that it had taken him so long, for the machine required so much energy. The black crystal ghost started launching the rocket. Lan Ling watched this and understood absolutely nothing. The satellite launch countdown began. 10, 9, 8. The people at the station are ready to pull the lever, with only 3 seconds left to count down. At the last moment, Master Zhang burst into the station, telling everyone to stop the launch immediately. He said there was a possibility that the system had been compromised. There was an immediate commotion inside. Everyone was ready to cancel the launch. When attempting to cancel, the workers reported that the system had gone out of LADA. It was not possible to block the ignition process. Zhang cried out in incomprehension. This was not part of their plans. The satellite got off the ground and took off despite all attempts to cancel. Sung Chung woke up in the dark. He couldn't realize where he was. He remembered almost getting hit by the alien's laser beam. He doesn't know why he didn't bounce to the side. He's not sure why he didn't bounce away. But afterward, a wave of intolerable heat swept over him. He thought he was going to die. He remembered Lan Lin. He was also injured, right? Chung can't linger in this obscure place. Suddenly he saw some kind of light. It was expanding, but when the boy tried to run into the open portal, he failed. Sung Chung stuck his cheek to it, and his eyes widened. He recognized this place. Through the portal, the guy saw the world of immortal cultivation. It turns out such a place really existed. Suddenly there were clouds and purple lightning in the sky. All the residents were frightened, and one of the chief told everyone to go and ask the 7 elders to come down from the mountain. The old ghost started laughing. He said that there was pure energy hidden in the world. Sung Chung recognized the ghost. After all, he had seen it before in his memories. Why did he keep seeing them in the first place? And why did that one come to that world? The black crystal ghost was destroying the immortal cultivation world. Chung decided that he had to get out of that place. He couldn't allow another disaster to happen. The memory told that the elders had sealed the ghost of the black crystals with the strongest technique somewhere in the worlds. However, it was concluded until the Interceptor system came into existence. The powers of this system were based entirely on the power of the ghost. Song Chung swung around and struck the portal. He shouted that if they wanted to use Laoji's powers to do bad things, they were too late. The black crystal ghost has launched a satellite. As he finished, he was amazed that it actually worked. The ghost was already contemplating how he would command an army of men and wreak havoc on the land, but his monologue was interrupted. Song Chung's hand emerged from the black crystal ghost's chest. The old ghost was stunned, but thought the hand was out of control due to the tremendous flow of energy. Sung Chung shouted to the ghost to give him back his body. Chung shouted again to give it back to him, and the ghost's silhouette distorted as if it had just been attacked. Immediately afterward, the guy's body was taken away and the ghost silhouette disappeared. Brother Lan ran up to Sun Cheng along with an elephant dragon. Lan Ling lifted Chung up and worriedly asked if he was all right. The ghost of Black Crystal whispered to the boy that he would be back and disappeared. 2 police cars with their blinkers on raced down the highway. Zhao Ling got out of the white car. One of the police officers was pointing her to the crime scene, reporting the details. When she and a couple other police officers ran up to the building, half of it simply wasn't there. Standing on a small island was Sung Chung. The boy looked at the crescent moon. Zhao called out to him once more. The girl noticed that Chung looked depressed. But why? Didn't they seem to have won? Zhang had called the girl half an hour ago with bad news about preventing the satellite from flying. But all the invasion processors had self-destructed. Zhao accepted the information and replied that she had received an alarm. A building on the outskirts has collapsed, and the girl thinks it's related to the maker. Zhao Ling looked up at Chung from below and told him not to worry about anything because the companion was fine. The guy stood still for a few more seconds and then jumped up, shrieking happily. This time the mission was difficult. Lin marveled at how infantile the boy was. After that, the girl smiled affectionately, looking at the guy enthusiastically. She would call it a contrast of cute and proper. Meanwhile, in the hero tower, Chung was promoted to the highest rank. He said that although the work was troublesome, he had jumped 2 small kingdoms. Sung Chung was endowed with a technique to keep enemies safe. The guy thought that maybe he could become invisible. After familiarizing himself with the techniques, the young man moved on to the most important loot boxing. When Chung opened it, a mountain of miscellaneous junk sprinkled on him. The guy pointed at Xiao Tong, who was sitting in the corner. The one indignantly said that the mountain of trash was too much. Its creator could think of something better. The girl turned around angrily and said that it was actually normal to receive such awards. She and Chung started a fight. The guy thought it wasn't interesting, and Xiao Tong argued otherwise. Lan Lin sighed heavily. The girl was angry. Song Chung felt a familiar aura, and he saw the ghost of Black Crystal in Xiao Qian's shadow. Chung knew that he was the master of the Black Crystal, but he was also the master of Xiao Tong. Could she be the Black Crystal? The boy closed his eyes and forced himself not to think about it. The girl pounced on Chung and slapped his forehead, saying that the system was exhausted after such a task. The guy only replied that it didn't matter what had to be done, she just had to solve the problem. Xiao Tian tried to pounce on him again, but he put one hand in front of him, rubbing the lump on his forehead. Seeing her in this state, he began to doubt that she was a Black Crystal. He didn't believe he couldn't get rid of this alien in his body, and Chung was sure he would solve the problem. At the same time, a young man was attacked by an unknown assailant in a city to the south. The one pushed him through the gate, and the guy fell loudly to the ground, raising a cloud of dust and knocking down a couple more people. The unknown man was holding a slate in his hand. It was already covered in blood. "This is a martial arts hall, and no one here knows how to fight." One of the guys got into a defensive posture and said that if John Doe was going to fight, he should at least give his name. The man smiled. Thoth was afraid of scaring them by saying his name. Thoth was just a shoe-wearing man with a love of martial arts. The guys around the unknown man were angry, yet the man kept talking. His goal was to find the strongest man and kill him. The man grinned. All the boys in the yard jumped on him. Thoth tossed the first one aside, then fought back with a second and third. Finished. The man made his way inside, looking around the room and getting frustrated. There was no way he could find the strongest master. Uncle Toad, swinging hard, threw another guy off. If the strongest one was here, he would get more pleasure from killing him. Sun Chung's house was surrounded by reporters dressed in animal costumes. The guy lost in the video game again. Lan Lin said that the one had too little experience. Chung lay down on the floor. He couldn't dare to go outside. The guy wished he was a mere mortal. A month ago, he was walking down the street, and a large number of his fans pestered him to take a picture, almost tearing his clothes. Xiao Tong said that this problem would be fairly easy to solve. The girl said that people don't see it very often, and that's why it piques their interest. She gave the example of the panda, because not everyone sees it every day on the street. Song Cheng and Lan Ling looked at Xiao Tong enthusiastically. She was really talking a case. Chung, with an acerbic smile, started dialing someone's number and suggested we see each other. He offered the girl on the other side of the phone to go abroad, but she refused, because she had overtime work. The guy fell to the floor without strength. That one was upset, but Xiao Tong said that he and Lan Lin could very well keep him company together. A few days later, this trio traveled to another city. It was a resort and was called Shanshui. Xiao Tong couldn't understand why Chung still hadn't taken off his mask. After all, the purpose of the trip was precisely to be recognized. The guy said sadly that Lin wasn't here, which meant his smile wasn't here either. However, just the next day he joyfully drove down the slide. The team was at the water park, and even there everyone recognized him. Ah-hing and ah-hing. Toward evening, those went to the hot springs. Sun Chung was glad that they didn't need to hide. One girl, seeing the guys, called out to her friend, pointing her finger at them. Ta turned around just as Sun and Lan began to drink the same cocktail. The girls shrieked, recognizing one of them as the spearmaster. They thought they were a couple. Sun Chung spotted them and said that they were not mistaken, and that he was indeed the master. The guy asked if they wanted to take a picture with him. A piece of paper of some sort fell next to Lan Lin. Pulling it out of the water, he saw an advertisement for a martial arts tournament. Xiao Tong also looked at the sheet. Lan Lin read that the winner would get the position of the leader of the Martial Arts Alliance. The girl started listing the prizes in this tournament. First place could get 50,000 yuan, and sixth place could get a limited edition Shuda figurine. Chung shrieked. He really loved these kinds of figures, and there was a limited edition figure as well. The guy wanted to get them. Lan Ling patted his shoulder and said that he himself could fulfill his wish. Song Cheng was touched and swooped down on Lan with a hug. Girls nearby marveled at this, saying how beautiful male friendship is. The day of the tournament came. The host welcomed everyone and introduced himself. Later, the man shouted from his stage that the battle arena was opening right now, and the huge crowd roared. The second fighter appeared, and the girls from the stands commented on his good looks. They thought they had already seen him somewhere. Lan Ling sailed his ship up to the arena where his opponent was already waiting for him. Thoth smiled haughtily, looking down at Lanya. Lin pitched forward and jumped from the ship into the arena. The start of the tournament was announced. The guy's opponent shouted for Lanya to accept his fate and jumped out of the arena above right at him. Lan Lin drew his sword and got into a defensive posture. The opponent smiled. He thought that Lan was afraid and was ready to tear him to pieces. Lin swung and hit the guy in such a way that he flew off at a tremendous speed into the sky. The guy laid down his arms and was declared the winner of the first round. Next, Lan Lin won another round by throwing the guy into the water. Guy was the winner of the third round as well, tearing his opponent's cape. Song Chung and Xiao Tong watched everything from the boat and rejoiced at his easy victory. But then a new unknown challenger to the duel suddenly appeared. Lan Lin was facing a new challenger for the top spot. The opponent was wearing a strange mask, looking at the guy silently. The boy from the bleachers started roaring and saying that the new challenger had just stolen his mask. The host was confused but introduced the new participant. He was from the Chinese Free Cultivation Alliance. The masked guy shrieked, saying that the alliance didn't ask origins. He demanded a direct confrontation. Sung Chung noticed something strange about the unknown guy. He was deliberately lowering his voice, and he was also wearing a mask. He and Xiao Tong were now hostile. Chung speculated that the new member might be a traverser. The girl, on the other hand, noticed a strange hesitation. The doe and the masked guy started the fight. The unknown man avoided the first attack by jumping up. Everyone gasped in surprise. After a few more strikes, Lan Lin concluded that this guy's kung fu was much better than the previous ones. However, the fellow did not attack at all. The tribunes roared in displeasure. If he had entered the arena, let him fight. The guy in the mask understood and gave in to the roars of the stands. He began to build up his strength as he got into a defensive posture. Lan Lin realized that now, things would finally start for real. The power had already accumulated between the unknown man's hands. Inside the ball was a turtle shell. Sung Chung opened his mouth in astonishment. That one recognized the strength of the unknown masked man. The guy was muttering something to himself, making the shell even bigger. Putting a lot of force into his punch, he threw it at Lan Lin, but he dodged it. Lan was familiar with the technique, but those tricks were the first time he had seen it. The fire shell punched a hole in the side of the arena and fell into the water. The stands were perplexed by the masked guy's technique. No one expected this. From the seat of the Murim sex, the young man recognized the unknown man and marveled at it. The masked guy realized he'd been exposed. He said some words and hid in the turtle shell. It was the first time Sun had encountered such a terrible traverser. Xiao Tong said Cheng is wrong. That guy was not a traverser, for the fluctuations come from the other side. Someone jumped out of the water and started shouting, how dare they hold a tournament in the absence of Lao Tzu? Song Chung and Lan Ling got into defensive postures, pulling out their weapons. Several people from Marim's sex seat already knew that it would end badly. A man jumped out of the water, saying he wanted to see how many of them could fight. The guy in the shell was whispering to himself that he would take advantage of the chaos and escape. The one came down from the high arena just below. Later, the one bounced off the floor and flew with a bullet towards that crazy man who was still flying at the guys. The shell flew right into the attacker's face and knocked him straight into the water. Sun and Lan ran up to the sides and looked into the water. Would they wait? At the same minute, that man came out of the water. The one spun the guy in the shell on one finger, demanding to fight him. He told them not to be afraid, for he would eventually kill them. Sung Chung and Lan Ling took off. Chung realized that that crazy man was a traverser. The man stuck out his tongue, saying that since they wanted to die together, they were welcome. Lin told his elephant dragon that they would stop the madman. The elephant dragon opened its mouth and fire came from there. He directed it toward the man who was flying on his shoes from the fire cloud. A huge stream of fire attacked him, almost knocking him backwards into the water. But even that didn't stop the man. It was as if he was invulnerable. The madman later regretted his words. Song Chung used his strength, his eyes turning completely white. That person called the man a toad. He wasn't the only one practicing secret methods. The man's face contorted in shock, but he seemed fine with the technique. Song Chung shouted out that the one was not the only one using secret techniques. In order to become strong, the boy practiced by balancing on small pebbles with weights on his arms and a rambling Xiao Tong at his side. The girl often got Chung up at 6 in the morning to ensure that he would not be lazy in bed. She said to rely on the system, and he did. Chung says that Uncle Toad is not only challenging him, but also the authority of the Ottawa. The guy used the enmity technique, and a huge yellow ghost with 4 arms appeared behind him. Uncle Toad smirked, admiring the martial art. It was exactly what he had dreamed of, a worthy opponent. The guy accelerated and started flying at Suna, yelling at him to watch him kill him. However, the guy put his arm out and attacked. There was a huge explosion, the sound wave traveling through everything in the vicinity. Chung held Uncle Toad's hand on his jersey, asking if he would admit defeat. However, the latter only said that he was the one who needed to surrender. Suddenly, the man's shoe spikes came out. The one flipped in the air, making an arc with his legs and nearly hitting Suna. The attack was thwarted by Lan Lin, putting his sword between the spike and Chung. The man shouted that the man dared not hurt his brother. In the same second, the guy's sword broke into 2 pieces, horror displayed on Lin's face. The green token of higher martial arts that was previously attached to the lantern fell from the pole. Uncle Toad saw this and said it was very good. He was sure he would have the token in his hand in 3 seconds. But before the man flew to the token, the man decided he would kill Chung first. Toad charged his spikes with electricity and pounced on the guy with his feet. Sun recognized the technique. It was a form of Buddha gasification. Suddenly, Uncle Toad hit something hard and looked at Chung indignantly. The guy with a haughty smile covered himself with a magical shield. The one that said it was a special technique for breaking high heels was a golden manhole cover. The man tried to get out, but his heel was deeply lodged in the shield. Lan Ling gazed admiringly at his brother. This was truly worthy of him. Such an easy yet effective trick. Chung smiled wryly, mockingly asking if the Toad uncle could get his legs, and maybe he wants to fly. After saying that, the guy swung around and backhanded the man to the elephant dragon. After catching the golden hatchling, Lan and his friend did not discover the Toad. Only his boot remained in the shield. Sun began to look around the area. Was the man ready to run away, leaving his precious shoe behind? Suddenly, the ground began to shake. There was an explosion in the arena above. All the people from the bleachers started scattering. The guy with the turtle shell shrank back. Something very bad was about to happen. The man stood on all 4s and enlarged. His skin was covered with warts and turning green. Immediately, Uncle Toad turned into a real giant-sized toad. A man from the Murima sect recognized this power as a forbidden legendary technique. His disciple cried out, saying that they were no match for him. Chung flew up and cried out, telling the monster to finally die, for secret techniques were not meant for this kind of transformation. The monster opened its mouth and let out some steam. Chung thought that this vapor was poison and began taunting the toad, saying that they tried to poison him with poisons and stronger ones. The monster got angry and put his tongue into action, trying to catch the guy like an annoying mosquito. Luckily, he was pushed away in time by the masked guy yelling to be careful. The turtle man is grabbed by a huge tongue and the monster swallows him. Lan Ling and Chung looked at everything that was happening. The former didn't understand what they should do. It would be difficult to find his weakness. Sun thought about it, looking at the monster and searching for a weakness. It dawned on him that he was a toad. Lan stared at his brother in bewilderment, but Chung put his index finger to his lips, urging silence. The boy hoped the turtle boy wouldn't let himself be digested, since he was already on his way to save him. Chung threw Lan Lin a magic weapon, already starting to explain the plan. Ling studied the weapon with interest. When he found a button, he pressed it. Chung said that since the man used the reincarnation technique, he had also adopted the weaknesses of the toad. At the pressure of the digging, the weapon extended. Sun said that toads have poor eyesight, so they only see prey that is in motion. That's why Lan uses this weapon to distract the toad, and the guy will strike at that time. While Lin waved his feathers in front of the toad's eyes, Chung covered himself with his cloak and slowly approached the monster. Toad grasped the weapon with his tongue and sensed the setup. They were bird feathers. They had tricked him! The monster got angry and got into a defensive stance. Just then, someone landed on one of the poles. This unknown person turned out to be a grandfather from the Murima sect, who asked why he was challenging juniors since he wanted to become a martial artist. He held a green token in his hands and waved it from side to side, urging the monster to take the thing away from him. Everyone on the ground of the Murim sect cried out. The Immortal tiger dragon finally made its first move. None of them could sit idly by, so several people jumped up, approaching the arena. Lan Lin heaved a sigh of relief. It was good that there were still noble people left. The old man began to berate the men. He said he was just distracting the monster and they shouldn't have come near. Toad gloated as they fought. He was going to deal with them after he kicked Chung's ass. Trying to move, the monster noticed his paws were chained to the floor. He shrieked, not realizing who had managed to do that and when. However, at the same second, Sun appeared in front of him, throwing the keys to the side. The guy looked confidently at the toad and was about to use one very interesting method. Chung flew off the floor and swung his right leg, hitting the monster's jaw with all his might. The tall arena flew away, tearing away from the columns along with the toad chained to it. The old man, landing carefully and waving his staff, approves of the job the lad has done. Grandfather waved once more and fixed the toad in a horizontal position along with the piece of arena in the air. Son looked at his hand. If he wanted to save the turtle boy, the blow should be of medium strength. The guy swung around and punched the toad right in the stomach. She began to grunt and gag, and then the turtle guy's shell flew out of her mouth. It was caught by Chung, staggering slightly. The man saluted the turtle. The boy thanked Chung for his help and jumped out of his arms straight into the water. Watching the one float away, Son thought that maybe it was because he was shy. After the guy was called by the old man, asking what he was going to do with that man. Chung said that if the man can realize his mistake and say goodbye to his image of a dog with fake shoes. He didn't let the guy finish and started shouting that he himself was a dog and his whole family was dogs. The male toad tried to attack him with his tongue, but Son only looked at the whole thing in disgust, commenting that he was very dirty. Uncle stiffened, not expecting such a thing to be said to him, dropping the man to the floor and holding a spear to him. The guy said he had no intention of letting him go. Raising his hand, he called out to Xiao Tong and Lan Lin, saying that they were returning home. The girl immediately appeared behind him with a wry smile. What? The one who was showing off, and now they're going home? The boy realized he had almost forgotten the purpose of the trip and back to where the members of Murima's sect stood. The old man said that after this battle, he would become the new master of the alliance and wanted to give the guy a token. However, the man walked past them, informing them that he wasn't interested in the token. The guy happily ran up to the front desk, which was also giving out prizes. He was given a figurine, and Son was puzzled when he examined it. It was not a handmade figurine, and certainly not a limited edition figurine. The girl behind the counter was frightened and started to explain that there was a typo in the flyer, and they were giving a limited edition figurine and gloves for 6th place. Chung stared at the girl for a long minute, and then turned around and tearfully walked away, shouting that they had deceived his feelings. But, after a couple minutes, he did come back and took that figurine with tears in his eyes. Xiao Tong, feeling sorry for Chung, asked if he wanted a good reward from her. The boy turned around, his eyes turning puppy-like. Chung shouted that the girl was the best system in the world, and later started guessing what the bonus would be, dropping all the gifts into Lan Lin's hands. Lin first followed those two, and then lowered his gaze to the gifts. The real gift should have been the limited edition gloves. Apparently, the figurine was an add-on. A masked journalist was on the phone, reporting the situation. The one was in front of Sun Chung's house, looking out for Lan Lang. He was surrounded by people who were against violating the personal boundaries of heroes, and tried to take the journalist as far away as possible. Song Chung watched all of this from the window, slightly opening the curtain. Zhao Yixiang was sitting on the sofa, scrolling through her Instagram feed. Everything was littered with pictures of Chung. It bothered her. She said it seems like the guy is getting more and more popular. Sung Chung covered her phone with the palm of his hand, telling her to forget about it. He loomed over her, looking straight into her eyes. Thoth said that the one in front of her was the real him, not the hero. The girl smiled embarrassedly and looked away, her cheeks flushed. The one leaned closer, and Chung reached across the table to cover the anime figurine's eyes. The guy leaned toward the girl, about to kiss her, but suddenly he heard someone's voices outside the door, asking for the photo shoot to be redone. Zhao was startled when she heard someone in front of the door asking to be left alone in an indignant tone. She seemed to recognize the man's voice, and her eyes rounded. Sun glanced unhappily at the door. As soon as the guy stepped away from Zhao, the one who apologized and broke the glass ran outside. The guy turned around at the whole scene. Was it really that bad? When he heard the knock, he turned toward the door with as sullen a face as possible. A disciple of the same old man that Song Chung had seen in Shanshui City entered the apartment. He didn't even hesitate to comment on the broken window. Following the guy was Zhang Qilin, and he was patted on the head by his disciple for his comment. Stopping in the hallway, Master Zhang bowed and apologized for his rudeness. They had business to discuss. The old man pushed his disciple forward with his foot. The latter slid across the floor straight towards Sung Chung. Master Zhang asked Sun to take this young man as his apprentice. Meanwhile, the boy had his arm around the spearmaster's leg. Chung started picking his nose and hesitated. He replied that he didn't want to accept anyone as his apprentice. He also asked if Zhang Qi wasn't a famous master. Then why can't he teach the young man on his own? The old man flew out the window without further ado, Suna's question catching him off guard. At last, Master Zhang only shouted words of farewell and left the guys. Song Cheng shrieked angrily. After all, this was already the second person flying out of this window. Xiao Tong and Lan Ling appeared in the room. The girl joked that the young man would make a great meal, while the other believed that he would be useful. The guy sitting on the floor shrieked. He didn't think there was anyone in that room and was puzzled. How had they gotten in there in the first place? Xiao Tong said they were always here, and this time it was time to perplex Chung. Lan said they just didn't want to disturb him and Zhang. Sun clutched at his heart, realizing how badly he had embarrassed himself in front of them. Xiao Tong diffused the atmosphere with a reminder of the reward she had promised. Had the guy forgotten about her? Chung perked up dramatically, leaving his new student to Ling and motioning for the girl to find a quiet place to discuss. The Spearmaster asked Lan Ling to help him keep an eye on that guy, and Ling gestured his agreement. When Chung left them, the disciple began his monologue by indirectly insulting Lan. He looked at the boy as if he were some stray dog. Ling then grabbed the young man by the hair and dragged him to the restroom. He tried to pull away, begging him not to do so. Meanwhile, Chung and Xiao Tong were already in the Tower of Heroes. The guy was eagerly waiting for his reward. The girl introduced the Tianxing refining cauldron to him with a smug look. Song Chung looked at the gift with interest. He was interested in how to use the cauldron. The girl offered to try it and handed him a packet of chips. Sun threw a few chips into the cauldron and it began to shake. A minute later, baked potatoes and beef stew came out. Chung took the dish in his hands, smiling widely. That one was pleased with the reward. It was many times better than a pile of junk. Next, the Spearmaster began throwing everything he could get his hands on into the cauldron. And out of all this, he got improved things. However, out of his expensive phone came a very old antique. The young man picked it up and began to resent it. How did this come out of his phone? Xiao Tong used a tone like she was talking to a child. She explained that the boiler used the system's energy and would have to work for a good result. Chung tearfully stuffed his new figurine into the cauldron. It looked like the cauldron would be used as a trash can. Toward nightfall, 2 junior high school students snuck into the dormitory. Walking up the stairs with flashlights, they discussed the latest school homicide situations. Those didn't believe they were true, and somehow no ghosts or monsters were definitely not there. Suddenly, the silhouette of a girl appeared behind them. She flew toward the first boy and ripped out his heart in one motion. The second boy, seeing this, was very frightened and rushed up the stairs, screaming for someone to come help. The girl sat next to the body, tasting his heart. It tasted awful, probably should have killed the other guy too. Song Chung stood in the courtyard of the school. Today she was exactly 50 years old. The guy was on the phone with Fatty Chan. They were going to meet outside the school doors. Chung searched with his eyes for his friend, but there was no way he could find him in the crowd. The guy asked the man to turn around, and as soon as Chan did, he waved to his boss. The ward's beauty dazzled. Sung couldn't believe it was the same Fatty Chan. Stepping closer, the blonde reminded the Spearmaster that the event was about to begin and they needed to hurry. Walking down the alley, Cheng asked if the man wanted to explain what was going on. Chang said that he had taken Xiaoqi's departure hard, so he spent all the evenings in the hall in tears. However, Sung Chung said he wasn't referring to his transformation and pointed to the Jera scooter under Chan's feet. Chan explained that guys nowadays were rarely handsome, rich, and tall. Both of them laughed at that. Here Chung realized that the nickname Fat was already outdated, as Chan had lost a considerable amount of weight. The guy said his full name was Chang Yang-wei, so the Spearmaster could just call him Yang. When the boys came around the corner, they saw a crowd of girls running and screaming from somewhere. Both boys immediately wondered what was going on there. Half an hour passed. They managed to call the police. The school principal thanked them and said that the holidays would be temporarily cancelled. The man also asked that the case not be publicized so as not to sow panic. Sun Chung quickly agreed. A body was found on campus, and apparently the guy was murdered that same night. That meant the killer could be somewhere in the school. Chung walked over to Yang, who wasn't feeling too good about what he was seeing. The Spearmaster said he would stay, so as not to worry about the corpses. Chang looked up and asked if he could help the cause, too. At the same moment, Xiaotong reported that she sensed a traverser nearby. It was then that the boy realized that he had not thought of it himself. After a couple seconds, the girl said the aura became weaker. He's probably running away. Sun apologized to Yang and, running away, said he could call any time if he had any problems. The guy thought that the existence of the system was best kept secret. The identity of the Spearmaster had already been revealed. Abruptly, the guy stopped in the middle of the road and started looking around. In the bushes, he noticed the tip of a tail. This seemed suspicious to Chung. When he opened the branches with his hands, he saw a fox with blood on its body. He tried to pick her up. It seemed to the guy that she was hurt. However, the animal reacted aggressively to this attempt and bit Suna's hand. The boy cried out. After the bite, she ran away and jumped through the classroom window. He stared perplexed at the disappearing fox, realizing that he had just been tricked. Sung Chung leapt to break the window and made his way into the classroom where the lesson was currently taking place. Taking a seat at someone's desk, Chung asked the guy by the window if he had seen anything strange. Before the boy could answer anything, however, the Spearmaster saw the tip of the beast's tail in the hallway. Sun chased the fox down the school hallway. He cornered her and she pretended to be him. Chung shouted that she was a monster and couldn't escape him. Suddenly, a young man appeared. He led the girl by the hand and shouted that the Spearmaster was wrong and that she was not a monster. Chung tried to reason with the guy. Let him take another look at her. She's definitely a monster. Just yesterday she ate a man, so he should run away. The young man next to the girl got into a defensive posture. He said that this girl was weak and did not eat more than a few fruits a day. It is not in her power to harm a human being. The boy continued, saying he wouldn't let Chung get his hands on the fox demon pill. Shun recognized the manga from which the sentence was torn. The girl smiled mockingly, but when the spearmaster noticed it, she played the role of an innocent vixen again. The young man promised to protect her. Sung Cheng realized that those probably wouldn't be able to negotiate and pounced on them. However, the girl fox reacted faster and grabbed her prey and flew upwards under the ceiling. She wrapped her tails around that guy's body and threatened to kill him if Chung didn't let go. He said to let the boy go, and then he would think about it. The girl broke through the glass and threw her protector down, saying that since Sun was asking, she would grant his wish. Sung Chung flew out of the window and prevented the guy from falling, raising a huge cloud of dust. By then, the fox girl had already run away, so Chung asked Xiaotong if she could track her location. But unfortunately, the one said that Daji's trail had been lost. However, another guest was approaching him. Sun shrieked and turned around. An unknown man was standing on the roof of the school building. He went downstairs, making a dent in the pavement. Toth said that if Chung wanted to find Daji, he would help him.